Ning stayed on the island for over a month, trying to find a way out of there. There was no ship or boats in that region of the ocean, so he was stuck there. He wanted to make a small raft, but he couldn't do that either as he had nothing to cut the trees with. He simply spent his days there eating the fruit juices and waiting to see some sort of aid in the ocean. There was nothing else he could do on this small island. Fortunately, the island wasn't that cold and it didn't rain at all, or he would have definitely gotten into a lot of problems there. However, that was starting to get boring too, and Ning was getting ever so closer to just teleporting away from this place. That was, until one day something happened that shook the entire island. Ning was using the sword to cut his fruit when suddenly he felt an earthquake hit the island. It was a strong shake and he couldn't remain standing at all. He fell onto the water and stayed there for a while. What's going on? He looked around worriedly. The shaking continued for a while, making him stay there. If Ning were to guess, that was strong enough to topple skyscrapers in a modern city. He felt himself slip away suddenly as he was pulled along with the waves. His weight, however, made it so that the sword slowly slipped away from the wave, falling to the sand below. Ning tried to remove his hands from the sword when he realized what was happening. The water had disappeared from the shore and so much more of the beach was visible. Is it a tsunami? Ning thought. He knew that after an earthquake, especially this close to the ocean, there was always the chance of a tsunami. Not only that, the water level receding meant that the tsunami was definitely coming. Ning decided to prepare for it, but he wasn't sure how he could do it at all. How could he, a normal human at the moment, prepare himself for a tsunami on a small island with nothing but small coconut trees? Should he climb his way to the top of the trees? Maybe the fact that they were standing meant that they were strong enough to handle these situations. Ning tried to run for the trees, but he stopped because he noticed something. About 20 or so meters from where he was in the direction of the receding water, he noticed a thin perimeter in the sand where the water simply dropped instead of moving back. What? Ning thought with a confused look as he noticed that the perimeter went around the island. As he followed the drop with his eyes, he realized something that he hadn't realized before. It was not that the water was receding at all, but the fact that the whole land was rising up from the ocean. What the hell is going on? His words stuck in his mouth as something rose from the ocean in the distance. A massive head popped out from the water with something long attached to it. Ning's eyes went wide when he realized that was a turtle head. Am I standing on top of a turtle? He couldn't help but ask himself, was he going to die from the beast? Just as he was feeling scared, something else appeared to get rid of his fear of the turtle. Not because he felt he was safe from the turtle now, but because his fear was replaced. The thing that appeared was a massive illusory snake that was nearly 10 times the size of the massive turtle he was on. Now that Ning looked at the head of the turtle, the thing that seemed to be sticking out of it was the snake's head, which seemed to have chomped off. The snake was dead, but it was still there to fight back one more time. The snake's illusory body hissed listlessly as it didn't know what to do. Its instinct kicked in and it attacked the first thing it noticed, the turtle. Suddenly, 5 massive blobs of water appeared in the air next to the turtle's head and they suddenly shot out a massive amount of water at the snake. In the next moment, each water blast left a hole in the snake's illusory body, which started disintegrating in the air and falling on top of Ning. Ning put up his arms in a reflex and suddenly the sword that he had gripped tightly at some point in fear came along with his arm. The illusory light simply passed through him like bits of light that weren't there to harm him at all. Ning was surprised and thankful that he was safe. Then, he looked at the sword in his hand and realized that he was actually picking it up. But how? He wondered. He let go of the sword and noticed that his palm was bloody. I must have gripped it too hard. He wondered if this was the same as chi. If only he had known that so many days ago. I should have tried to use it so much earlier, Ning thought. He staggered a bit as the turtle's head went underwater, and then, it started moving. Ning watched as the ocean waves moved away in the distance and he realized he was finally moving away from this godforsaken place. The turtle remained floating at the top and thankfully didn't go underwater as Ning's journey truly began in this world. Oh, I should go look out for some boats now, he thought. Hopefully I can find some. He quickly grabbed the sword and ran away from the beach towards the center of the island where the trees were. He climbed up the tree and arrived at the top where he sat and watched all around him. With him moving from this location, He was sure he would definitely find a place to depart soon enough. Ning reached below the tree and grabbed onto one of the fruit before picking it. He used his sword to give it a slight cut and drank everything without wasting a single drop of the fruit. He threw away the skin and watched the distant horizon to hopefully see some boat or ship. It had been 3 weeks since the turtle started moving and Ning had once again gotten bored. All he did was stay on top of the tree and watch the ocean while occasionally eating the fruit. Thankfully, the fruit wasn't as bad to eat as it used to be the first time around. He had eaten so much of the fruit that he had gotten used to it by now. Ning no longer had to take a dump every time he drank the juices. By now, the liquid would stay in his body long enough that he could simply pee and be done with it. Ning jumped from one tree and landed on the other one. His body felt supremely flexible and strong, something that should not be the case unless he was improving himself with the energy. Ning couldn't help but wonder what energy he was absorbing from the juices of the fruit. He felt like he should know the answer, but given that he had removed all of his knowledge about the other energies, he was drawing a blank each time. I swear I saw this energy when I was in Genesis, Ning thought, but he still didn't remember it. A few more days passed and Ning was getting tired of everything. He was on the verge of just giving up and teleporting to the closest land when he noticed something. There was a small boat in the distance. It looked small from where he was, so he wasn't sure if he could tell the size or not. He immediately jumped from the tree and ran up to a pile of leaves he had prepared long ago. He took a rock he had found and struck it hard with his sword. He could see the sparks flying in the shadows as they fell on the leaves. He tried a few more times and got a fire going. He piled a few more leaves on top and climbed back on top of the closest tree. "Hey, here!" he shouted as loud as he could, hoping the people on that boat could hear his screams in the ocean. He wasn't sure how far his shouts could travel, but given that it was an open ocean, he had very high hopes. Black smoke started filling the sky, trailing behind him as the turtle continued moving through the ocean. Ning continued shouting, but it didn't look like the people were listening at all. Let alone listening, they seemed to be drifting away. "Wait, no!" Ning shouted and piled up some more leaves to create stronger smoke, but those people were definitely leaving. Ning was worried that they would get far away, and then he would no longer get a chance to leave this island. As he thought that, he noticed a small land on the horizon. That was the closest he had gotten to any single land since he had arrived here nearly 2 months ago. Hell no, he thought. I am not gonna miss this. He jumped down from the tall tree, landing on his own 2 feet as he ran towards the shore in the direction of the boat and the land. He waited to see the direction of the turtle and realized that the turtle had still a few ways to go before it was close to the land. As hours passed, the land came closer and closer to him, which was still many kilometers away. Ning looked for the boats, but most of them had disappeared already. Damn it, no boats, he thought and looked towards the land in the distance that was definitely perpendicular in direction to the path of where the turtle was heading. I'm not missing this, Ning thought, not a chance. Without hesitation, he jumped into the waves on the beach and started swimming away. The water was cold, but that was surprisingly not very uncomfortable. After a few strokes in the water, he realized that he didn't need to do much to stay afloat. All he had to do was hold onto his sword which floated on top of the water without sinking at all. Ning could put his entire body's weight on the sword and it still wouldn't sink even the slightest. "Ha!" Ning shouted and started swimming with just his legs while his body was on the flat side of the sword. He had to be careful not to cut himself, but that was about it. Everything else from here on out was simple. I hope no sea beasts attack me though, he thought. He remembered the snake from long ago and shuddered. The giant snake was something that could wrap around the island at least 5 times. If such massive beasts were here as well, it would be extremely problematic. Fortunately, no beasts appeared at all. Ning continued swimming for hours and he didn't even notice a single fish. The sun was starting to get low by now, but there was still enough light in the sky, and with that, he noticed a small fishing boat not far away from him. "Help!" he shouted with a tired voice. Even if his body was strong, after swimming for so long, Ning was surprised at how weak he felt. "Help!" He shouted a few more times before the fishermen saw him. They rowed their boat towards him and pulled him up onto their boat. "Dear Lord, young man, are you okay?" one of the men asked. Ning wanted to nod to say he was okay, but he was surprised that all he could do was shake from the cold. Let the young man heat up first, another man said. Take off your clothes. They will only make you colder. Here, take this blanket. Ning shook uncontrollably, but he managed to sneak a thank you in his shaking. Ning was brought to the shore around twilight and was taken into the fisherman's village. Young man, sit by the fire, the fisherman who saved him said as they placed him close to the bonfire that seemed to be placed in the center of the village. Ning looked around, getting a distinct feeling of déjà vu. It felt all so familiar to the Clavian village he had arrived all those years ago, with people that sat by the fire at night, eating fish. Can you speak now? One of them asked. Yes, I can. Ning spoke as well as he could. Thank you for saving me. Of course, the fisherman said. That's what we are supposed to do. Sit here, we will get you something to eat. Ning nodded and waited. A few minutes later, the man brought back a bowl of steaming fish soup and handed it to Ning. Ning saw a small wooden spoon and took it to eat the soup. The taste wasn't all that great, it was simply salt and maybe one more mild spice, but getting to eat the hot soup when he had been freezing cold just a few moments ago made it feel so good. This is delicious, he told the man who brought the fish to him. Haha, my wife is an amazing cook. Eat up and don't hesitate to ask for more, the man said. People started surrounding him soon enough, asking questions as to who he was and where he was from. Ning told them exactly what he knew. I woke up on an island without my memories. I survived by eating the fruit there for a few days. Then it turned out that the island was actually a giant turtle, which was. Ning continued telling the story and each person around him had a distinctly shocked look on their face. He could understand their feelings too. Like, who would expect an island to turn out to be on the back of a turtle, one that killed a giant freaking snake? Some of them started praying while others decided to move away from Ning. You have met the divine beast then, one of them said. The what? Ning asked. Divine beasts. Legend says they are beings of incredible power that can destroy the world if they felt like it. Maybe humans of incredible power wish to reach their strength as well, but very few come close, the fisherman said. There are humans that are as strong as those beasts? Ning asked curiously. Can I meet them? No, the fisherman shook his head. As lowly humans will never have the opportunity to meet the ones who have reached the pinnacle of essence itself. Essence? Ning asked. The fisherman looked at him weirdly. Do you not know what essence is? He asked. I'm afraid this is the first time I'm hearing the word after losing my memories, Ning said. Dear Lord, you must have fallen in a terrible shipwreck, the fisherman said. Or worse, the divine beast stole you from somewhere. You did well to leave. Anyway, about essence, Ning asked. Can you tell me more about it? I can tell you a bit, the fisherman said. But I must say, I as well as everyone here is mostly ignorant in the ways of the essence. The only thing most of us have managed to do is reach the physical improvement realm. Only us two have reached the 5-sense improvement realm, which is why we hunt so far out in the sea. Ning heard what they said and thought he understood it, but he still asked them to explain it a bit more. As expected, the physical improvement realm was where one's body improved significantly when compared to a normal human being. One could go anywhere from twice as strong to 10 times as strong in the process. The improvement depended apparently on the quality of the essence one took in, which not many had control over. Also, it was apparently very hard to get to the next realm without using a technique, but the poor fisherman had no way of buying any. In the many dozens of years they had been alive, only 2 had managed to reach the 5-sense improvement realm. As the name suggested, the 5-sense improvement realm improved one's 5 senses, allowing them to be far more perceptive of everything around them. They could improve so much that they could feel the subtle change in air pressure, temperature, and humidity just by being outside in the air. They could taste the subtlest difference between 2 similar flavors, or smell the difference between 2 similar smelling odors. They could even see the smallest movement and could in fact see many, many miles away with just their naked eyes. Similarly, they could also hear the faintest sound once spoke and distinguish individual sounds in a crowd. That was to say, the 5-sense improvement realm was a major improvement to a normal human's daily life, making them far better at almost everything in comparison. Since these 2 fishermen were the only ones that were in such an amazing realm, they took on the task to go for more dangerous areas where they could fish for the village. They talked for a while and Ning learned a bit more about essence, but these people had nothing important to give him. Ning asked a bit about where he was and where he could go next. They couldn't even tell him much about that. However, there was apparently a city that they would be visiting 2 days later, so Ning just had to wait around for that. They would be going to the city to sell what little they could and buy some grains. Ning decided to spend the 2 days he had here and then he would go to the city to continue his journey in this world. Essence, huh? He thought to himself. I wonder if I interacted with it before. I must have since I removed the memories. Anyway, this should be fun. Ning sat in the front of the cart where the driver's seat was. The cart itself was full of fish and was very smelly, so he was forced to sit in front, even though it was a tight fit with 3 of them there. The path to the city took 3 hours with the cart and horses, and the path went through normal grasslands and small forests, so there wasn't much for Ning to do. He held a small circular disc no more than an inch wide in diameter. It looked like a small, flat pebble one would throw to skip in the river. Except, this small thing was made up of cloudy white energy. It was like someone had encased air into a small glass disc. I see, Ning said as he looked at the thing in his hand against the sky. So this is an essence coin. This is the currency of this land, huh? Not just this land, the fisherman to his right said. Of all lands. This is the only currency available, of course. Ning nodded. Of course, this isn't the only essence coin available, the man to his left said. This is the air essence coin. They are the most widely available essence coin because of how easy it is to find air essence. It is everywhere in the surrounding. The other man nodded. Air essence is the most widely made and found essence coin. The one above that would be the earth essence coins. Then it would be the water essence coins, and finally the fire essence coins, the man said. I see, Ning said. Is there a reason why the fire is above water? Is it because of how abundant water is? Yes, the man said. What about places where water isn't available? Ning asked. Would they still hold water essence in the same regard as fire essence? Oh, the value of the coins depends on the area you are in. This close to the ocean, the water essence doesn't hold as much value as the fire, which is why it ranks lower. But in other places, it would obviously hold higher, the man said. Ning nodded. So, are these 4 essences the only ones with coins for them? He asked. The 2 fishermen looked at each other and hesitated a little. We've heard of other types of essence coins, but we've never seen them, so we're not sure, they said. I see, Ning said. Well, I will find out eventually. He continued learning more about the essence coins and how they were made. He was surprised to hear that the coins were actually made by humans themselves. It was not like spirit stones or monochores that one could find somewhere naturally. The 2 fishermen did not have any idea how they could be made, but apparently, they were created by humans, which was why the 4 primary elements had the most amount of coins for it. Since many people were used to the elements, they were the ones who would make the coins easily, allowing them to spread throughout the world. Ning wondered how they were made and couldn't help but look forward to it. Learning new things he didn't just know was a different experience he hadn't experienced in a very long time after all. The cart arrived close to the city and Ning could already see the change in people's clothes from the fishermen to the normal people here. Ning looked at his own clothes and found that he was not so different from theirs either. At a glance, it looked like he was from here, even though the clothes didn't exactly match the style of this place. A while later, they entered Frailheart City, which was just past a small river with a wooden bridge on top. Many people either walked or rode on carriages, carts, or simply horses. Ning looked at the architecture, which looked somehow very old and modern at the same time. The design itself was old, almost medieval in style, but the technique used to make the houses, and the craftsmanship behind it was very advanced. The cart stopped outside of a moderately big butcher's shop that sold all types of meat, apparently including beasts of up to 5 cents improvement realm. Ning got off and looked at the 2 fishermen. Is this where your business is? He asked. Yes, we will sell our fish here, and after buying some grains, we will return, they said. I see, Ning said as he looked around. Thank you for bringing me here and for taking care of me for the last 2 days. Haha, it is what we must do, the 2 fishermen said. Right, don't forget your sword. Ah, yes, Ning said and brought the sword from the back. The sword was wrapped in some loose clothes. They had tried wrapping it tightly, but the clothes kept getting cut open. He wrapped the sword around his waist and nodded to himself. I will be leaving now, Ning said. If I manage to find my way home, I will try and come back to visit you all. Do come. You will be welcome anytime, the fisherman said. Ning nodded one last time and left. Even though he had said those words, he knew he would never return to these fishermen ever again. There was no reason for him to. He would continue from here on, traveling the rest of the world, so coming here was not something he was really planning on doing. However, he was still grateful for them, and for that, he had already helped these people. While he wasn't going to use the system for himself in his travels, it didn't stop him from helping these people. Ning had left them a very good technique to absorb essence that would improve their speed and talent by a lot. Ning himself had no idea what sort of technique it was, except that it had something to do with water essence, which was abundant that close to the ocean. Alright then, where should I go next? Ning walked through the city, looking around to see what he could do there. With only a single set of clothes and a sword to his name, he wasn't sure how he was going to pay off anything without just making money with his system. Wait, I can't even do that, he thought. The essence coins were made with essence, so it was impossible to create them with his system. I guess, I'm going to have to work for it, he thought. The city of Frailheart didn't seem to be the biggest city around. Based on what he could see, not a single person seemed to have enough essence order to justify this being a big city. In Ning's eyes, it was barely better than a town at all. There were some fun things to look at, but he wasn't sure how they were made. The shops all had massive boards in front of them that seemed to be made up of nothing but light. They were bright and glowed even in daylight. Ning wondered how they were made at all. As he was looking at them, he noticed a shop that apparently sold weapons. He stopped for a moment and looked at the shop, and then his sword. Should I sell my sword? He wondered. He had already refined the sword, so he wasn't sure if he could sell it or not, but if he could, he would be happy to get the few coins from the shop. Since he was more of a spear user than a sword user, he wasn't particularly attached to the sword he had. He walked into the shop and saw quite a few people there, browsing the catalog. He looked around, trying to find someone to talk to. Greetings. A clerk walked up to him. Are you looking for a weapon? We've had the best essence weapons delivered to us just a couple of days ago. Oh, no, I'm not here for essence weapons, Ning said. Oh, the clerk said. Then we have essence armors too. Or are you searching for regular weapons and armor by any chance? No, Ning said. I'm not here to buy at all. I was wondering if I could in fact sell my weapon. Sell? The clerk looked at Ning and then at the sword wrapped around his waist. That will depend on the quality of your weapon. Please wait for a moment, I will find someone to appraise it. Ning nodded and waited around. He looked around and something caught his eye immediately. There were weapons to the side that seemed to be made up of different essences. There was a sword that seemed to be burning with fire, even though it didn't give off any heat or burn the wooden stand it was on. There was another sword that was made with water. The blade swayed and rippled, but not a single drop of water came down from the sword itself. There was a sword that had a blade that was made entirely of air, and another one that was made entirely of dirt. Another one was made up of light, and there seemed to even be one made up of clouds. I see, he thought. So these are the essence weapons. I wonder how they are made. Ning looked around and saw a spear as well. The shaft of the spear was up of wood, but the blade itself seemed to be made up of fire. Ning tried to find other spears, but there weren't any. It was the only one. There were axes, bows, arrows, and other various weapons, but Ning didn't care about those. Sir, please come with me. The clerk arrived next to Ning and spoke. Ning turned around and nodded before following the clerk through a door to the back. He arrived in the back room that seemed to be full of wooden crates, some of which glowed a dull red or blue color. These boxes seemed to be full of similar essence weapons as well. An older gentleman sat on a chair on the other side of the table. He looked at Ning walk in, but his eyes immediately went toward the sword on his waist. Come on, hurry up, the man said, gesturing for Ning to bring out the weapon. Ning didn't react to his bad attitude and placed the sword on the table in front of him. He slowly unwrapped the baggy wrappings and showed the rusty-looking sword to the man. The man frowned for a moment. Is that a sword made from rust essence? He asked for a second before looking closer. Oh no, it's just red dirt. He started appraising the sword after that. The design is not bad, he said. It's an old design, but you can't go wrong with that. On design alone, I would put a price of 100 air coins for it. 100 air coins. Ning thought. He thought back to what the two fishermen had told him in terms of what they could get and what they could buy with air essence coins. Didn't they say they got about 50 for what they sold, and that would be enough grain to last them for a month? He thought. That meant that his sword was going to be sold for at least 2 months' worth of food for an entire village. That's not bad, he thought. Let me test the sharpness, he said, and brought out a few things. There were leaves, papers, leather, and a small piece of metal. Let's see if it is sharp or not, the man said, starting with the leaf. He grabbed the sword and tried to use it, but he couldn't find the strength in him to pick the sword up at all. Damn it, did you claim it already? The man asked him. Claim? I think I did, Ning said. Is that a problem? Damn, the old man said. It makes it hard to appraise. All right, use the sword and cut these things. I want to test them. Ning nodded and picked the sword up as if it was light as a feather. Then, he started with the test. The metal sheet cut as easily as the leaf did. There was no resistance on any of the 4 tests, surprising the appraiser very much. That is a very sharp sword, the man said. That is it, Ning replied, placing the sword back on the table. So, what's the verdict? I still need to do a few more tests, the man said. Can you bring it out back? He and Ning walked back and asked Ning to place it on the ground. Ning nodded and placed it on the ground and looked around the area, noticing that it was smithy back here. People were making weapons and armor, but it didn't seem like there was anything essence-related happening here at all. Oi, you lot! Come here, the man shouted, and everyone who was working in the smithy looked at him. What's going on, sir? One of them asked. We have an earth essence sword here. I want you to help me find out how heavy it is, the man said. Oh, okay. The men all gathered around the sword and started tying ropes around the handle. Careful around the blade. It's incredibly sharp, the appraiser told them, and everyone carefully placed the rope around the hilt and guard with Ning's help. Once done, only one person tried to pick it up by pulling on the rope. His face went red as veins started popping all over his head and arm, but even then he couldn't nudge the sword even the slightest bit. Another one joined, and he was the same. He tried moving it, but the sword didn't move a single inch. Ning walked next to the man and asked, What exactly are you trying to find out? He asked. Isn't it enough to know it is heavy? I'm trying to find out how heavy it is, the man said. He pointed at the sword and said, See that color? That tells me that the sword was made using some sort of rock, or pile of red dirt or something. Given how weak their essence usually is, I need to figure out how much of it was exactly used to learn just how strong the sword's output can be. Ning nodded to himself as he heard that, but he didn't exactly understand what the man meant. How does one make a sword like this? He asked. I simply can't imagine how one can control real-life things to turn them into weapons. Well, don't ask me. I'm only in the essence sense realm. I hear you have to essence manifestation realm to even begin to try making something like this. The man was about to continue, to explain more about the weapons and armor, but stopped. Giving out industry secrets was not something he should be doing so easily. Anyway, if your sword had a lot of essences, it will sell for more, the man said. He turned and watched the others trying to pick up the sword, but with each added man, he frowned. There were 6 people now, and each of them strained their hardest to pull the sword up, but not a single one was able to do it at all. What the hell is going on? The man asked. How are you still failing? The group stopped and took a few deep breaths. Sir, this sword is incredibly heavy, one of the men said with bated breaths. I don't think we can pick it up. It can't be so heavy that so many of you fail to pick it up, right? The man asked. You 3, help them. 3 more people were added to the group, and they tried once again, but the result was the same. The appraiser frowned and called all of the remaining people to help and joined on it himself. They all tried to pick the sword up, but they all failed once more. What the hell? The appraiser shouted and turned to Ning. What the hell is this sword made up of? A mountain. Ning didn't know what to answer. I don't know, he said. I just found it. He was starting to realize that maybe the sword wasn't something he should be getting rid of so easily. Is seeing a sword out of a mountain rare? He asked. Rare? It's fucking impossible to imagine one even existing. The appraiser was visibly shaken and started cursing. Oh, Ning smiled. Maybe his sword was made up of a mountain. If not a mountain, then a very large rock for sure, seeing how nearly 15 people failed to pick it up. He walked over and picked the sword up easily, untying the ropes from its hilts and guard. "I'm assuming you won't be buying it then?" Ning asked. "You can't even seem to be able to pick it up after all." The appraiser frowned. "No," he said. "There's no way we can sell something that we can't even put on the stands." Ning nodded. "Still, what would you say this sword will sell at the very least?" he asked. The man thought for a bit. "If the craftsmanship is even low grade, the sword can sell for at least 4,000 fire coins easily," he said. "Whoa. 4,000 fire coins. How much is that in air coins?" Ning asked. The man thought for a moment. "Around 16,000 air coins," the man said. "It really is a very expensive sword. I do not know how you received it, but I suggest you be very careful with it. If someone recognizes its value and decides to steal it from you, you will be in a very bad time." "I see, thank you for the information," Ning said. "No problem," the man said. "It will be 5 air coins then." Ning was about to turn around to leave when he heard the words, 5 air coins. He asked, "For what?" "For the appraisal," the man said. "But my sword wasn't sold," Ning said. "Yes, but I still appraised it. The appraisal cost would be taken from the sale, but since you're not selling, I have to ask you for it." Ning looked at the man blankly for a moment before saying, I don't have any money at all. Is there any other way I can pay you back?" Ning was forced to work in the smithy for 3 hours to pay the man back for the appraisal. He technically only had to work for a single hour, but the old man decided to give him 2 more hours so he could earn some money instead, since he didn't have any. The task was supposed to be hard as he had to continuously beat blobs of molten metal into the shape of an armor. The thickness had to be very much the same all the way around, and he had to make sure the metal was properly tempered. He was used to working on metals to make items, but it was different when working with chi. With chi, he was capable of melting the metal and shaping it without even having to touch it. The only hard part there was putting chi lines into them, but without any energy, he had to make sure he didn't ruin it all. Surprisingly, he was rather good at it all. The other workers were impressed and even asked Ning to join them. They were willing to teach Ning whatever else he didn't know about. However, Ning didn't join them. He refused to work there, and after the 3 hours were done, he stopped. The appraiser gave him 10 air coins and Ning left the weapon shop. He had wanted to buy some scabbard for his sword, but his sword was so sharp that it would cut anything he put it into. Worst case scenario, Ning would have to put it into his interdimensional storage. He didn't really mind that idea, however, as he had also already used the storage once before. That was the only time he was willing to break any rule he had set for himself. He walked around the city, learning more about it, and soon realized that it was getting dark. The light would disappear in just an hour or two. While that most likely wasn't bad, given how light itself were turned into the shop's signs and light posts, there was another problem with the rain. The sky was getting cloudy too, and at any moment it would rain. Ning found himself a small tavern and walked in. He asked for a room and was happy to hear that he could stay and get 3 meals a day for the 10 air coins. The smithy sure gave him quite a bit of money. It started raining outside and the tavern got rowdy with all the people that came to eat after a long day of work. Ning sat by a table towards the wall, and the tavern owner, a big woman, brought him some heavy soup with some vegetables and meat in it, and a large jug of mead. Ning thanked her and started eating. The food wasn't delicious, or even that tasty at all. It was mediocre at best, but it was edible and the seasonings weren't bad enough to ruin the taste. So, Ning could still eat it. More and more people walked into the tavern, and soon people had to sit next to Ning so they could enjoy some food and drinks. Ning finished eating and looked at the mead that was next to him. It didn't look the best of drinks he could think of, and it didn't even smell all that good. But given how the people of the tavern laughed around while drinking, Ning wondered if this was fun at all. Since his body had always been so strong and had high metabolism, he could drink for hours and hours and not get drunk. However, now that he was using a new body, he wondered if that was still the case. Surely, he could still get drunk, right? Without hesitation, he drank a mouthful of mead, gulping it all down at once. It burned his throat as it went down, and he hated that sensation. "Wow, that sucks," he spoke, disregarding the people that were around him, who were drinking as well. It is, isn't it? The man next to him said. It's the shittiest drink you can find in the entire city. The man took another gulp. But damn if it doesn't make you want to take another sip. Ning laughed and drank as well. He somehow started talking with the people there, drinking together with them. Is this the first time you're drinking, young man? One of them asked. It sure is, Ning said, slightly tipsy but with enough control over himself to keep a clear head. Haha, do you like getting drunk? The man asked. It's not a bad feeling, I suppose, Ning said. Haha, then you should buy another round. Buy it for us as well, the man said. I'm sorry fellas, I'm all out of money, Ning said. I already spent all the 10 coins I had on renting a room for the next week. I will have to go out and look for some job tomorrow to even find a way to buy anything I want. What? You're goddamn broke then, the man said. I sure am, Ning said as he brought his jug up. Cheers to being broke. Cheers. The rest of them shouted as they laughed and drank some more. Ning happily took another sip, only to realize he had drank it all. Oh, I'm done it seems, he said as he chuckled a bit. You want another one? The man next to him asked. Yes, but I don't have any money, Ning said. It will be on me, the man said. Also, it looks like you're looking for a job. Do you want one? Sure, Ning said. What sort of job is it? Package delivery, the man said. You take something from one place to another, and vice versa. Sure, Ning said. Does it pay well? The task takes an entire day to complete, but if you do complete it, I will pay you 20 earth coins, the man said. Oh, Ning grew attentive when he heard that. If it pays that well, then I am definitely willing to do the job. Ning went to sleep on a rather stiff bed, but it was better than sleeping on the pile of itchy leaves on the island, or the stiff and cold ground in the fisherman's village. With how tipsy he had been last night, he ended up falling asleep rather quickly and woke up with a slight hangover instead. Ugh. This sucks, he thought. He felt thirsty, extremely thirsty, and looked around for some water to drink. However, he couldn't find any at all. He somehow found it too bothersome to go down to ask for some water, so he did what he thought was the right thing. He reached into his storage space and pulled out one of the fruits he had taken from the island. Since he had been planning on leaving the place for a long time, he had gathered as many fruits as he could. Since he had nowhere to keep it, he decided to use the storage to keep the fruits, not only as a measure to store them because of how many there were but also to store to preserve them. Keeping them outside would most likely ruin them, and Ning didn't want that. He found the sword on the floor next to him, which he quickly unwrapped and cut the fruit to drink. The refreshing taste of the fruit's juices fell into his mouth and with every gulp, he passed it along to his body. His thirst was quickly quenched, and to his surprise, Ning even found that his hangover was getting better. By the time he had drank it all, there was absolutely no problem with him at all. He was properly refreshed. Whoa! This fruit is seriously amazing, he thought to himself. I should see if anyone recognizes what it is. Ning went down to the tavern to find the owner and asked her about the fruit. The woman looked at the fruit a bit but she did not seem to recognize it at all. She didn't even know of any fruit that had such a property to it. Ning was slightly dejected, but not very much. We went to the back of the tavern to use a bathroom and get freshened up. Then, he remembered the man yesterday that he had promised to work for him. Where did he ask me to meet again? Ning thought. He remembered the man's face from last night and tried to think of where he was said to meet. What the hell? Why is it so hard to remember? He thought. He tried his best, but for some reason, he couldn't remember much at all. Shit, I forgot to buy eidetic memory, didn't I? Ning thought. He had such a high cultivation base and so many memories that were permanently stored in his mind while in the other body, he forgot that he even needed to buy it. He tried the best he could to remember. The man had a short beard, frizzly hair, and... Did he have a scar on his face? Ning thought. There was definitely something there, most likely scars from untreated acne. Package delivery, Ning remembered. That's what he wanted me to do, and, right, by the side of the green building next to the bridge. Ning finally remembered. That took some time, he thought as he sighed. He thought of buying the eidetic memory to help with his adventure as a normal human in this world and realized that a normal human wouldn't have that. So, he decided to not buy it at all. He could still buy all the memories he would lose in the end anyway, so he wasn't very worried. He quickly left the tavern, going out toward the bridge that was toward the east. The bridge wasn't the same one he came from yesterday, the one he crossed with the villagers. That bridge was small and was on the west side of the city. The one Ning was going towards was on the eastern side, slightly to the south, and was the bigger bridge, with a wider pathway. It was far enough from the tavern that it took him nearly half an hour to walk on foot. He was about 100 meters away from the bridge and saw a green-colored house there that was the only one there. As he was about to go there, a man walked up to him. "You there, stop," the man said. Ning turned around and noticed the man, who was in a uniform. The blue uniform belonged to the guards of this city, so Ning understood that he had probably done something wrong. "Yes, brother. How can I help you?" he asked. "What's that?" The man pointed to his sword. That's my sword," Ning said. He wondered if it was illegal to walk around with his weapon. But then again, many did. "Why is it not in a sheath?" the man asked. "Oh, it's too sharp to keep in a sheath. It would cut right through it," Ning said, without thinking much. The man's eyes went wide. "It can cut right through a sheath and you decide it's a good idea to keep it uncovered?" he asked. "Oh," Ning thought for a moment. "Damn, you're right. This is dangerous. Find a sheath for that sword. Make sure you don't have to be told another time," the guard said. "I will. Thank you, brother," Ning said and walked away. He made sure to walk away from most people, so as to not accidentally cut them. He arrived at the green-colored house and quickly saw the man that was next to it. "There he is," Ning thought and walked towards him. The man had noticed him already and waited for Ning to reach him. Just as he did, the man grabbed Ning by his collar and slammed him onto the wall. "Why the hell was the guard talking to you?" the man shouted. "Ow!" Ning shouted. "Get off me! Answer me!" the man shouted. "Nothing," Ning said. "He was just telling me that I shouldn't keep my sword out in the open." "God, why do you care? Are you a criminal or something?" Ning wasn't sure what to make of the man's face when he asked him if he was a criminal. He had asked it offhandedly, but judging by the expression, it seemed like he really was one. Of course I'm not," the man said. "Dude, who are you kidding?" Ning asked. "I should have known by how shady this meeting place even is. You're asking me to meet by the side of a random house, and are worried that I was with the guards." "No, I'm not," the man said. "Do you want the job or not?" "What's the job?" Ning asked. "What do I deliver?" "No, I don't think I want to give you the job anymore," the man said. "Hey, come on, man. I need the money. As long as it's not something bad, I'll do it," Ning said. The man grumbled to himself for a moment and nodded. He then brought out something that he was hiding on his back. "You will need to get this to the next city. Just beyond the bridge, someone will be waiting for you. As long as you get it to them, they will give you something back, which you'll have to bring here. As long as you do that, you'll get paid," the man said. Ning reached out to the package, curiously, and the man pulled back quickly. "What are you doing?" the man asked. "I was just trying to see what it was," Ning said. "You don't get to see what's inside," the man said. "What?" Ning looked at the man. "How the hell am I supposed to believe that you're not making me do something illegal if I can't even check what it is?" "You don't need to see what it is. You just need to deliver it, all right?" the man asked. "I don't know, brother. You're acting really shady right now. I'm starting to wonder if you're even trustworthy in the first place," Ning said. "I think I'll give up on this job. It doesn't seem like something that's good for him." Bang! A massive explosion sounded from far away, forcing Ning to stop speaking quickly. He and the other man both looked toward the direction of the explosion. "What was that?" Ning couldn't help but ask. It didn't sound that far away. The man looked in the direction of where the explosion had happened and couldn't help but frown. "All right. Listen to me. I don't have the time," the man said. "Here is your payment. Up front." The man brought out 10 earth coins, presenting them in front of Ning. "No, I'm not doing your work, Anym. I don't have time for this," the man shouted, forcing Ning to take the coins. "You are right. I am a criminal, all right. But what I'm sending with you is not something illegal by any means. I was going to do it myself, but something's come up and I can't do it," the man said. "Take this to the other city. There will be people waiting for you to take the item there. You will recognize them rather easily after using the keywords, loud silence, so you won't have to worry about not knowing who to give it to." They will test the item and give you a package as well, depending on the result. Bring back the package to me, the man said. Do this for M. The man's eyes moved all of a sudden to his left towards the river from where men started jumping out at him. The fuck? The man shouted as he pulled out 2 daggers by his side. One of the daggers had a blade that glowed bright red, while the other one glowed a dull gray. How the fuck did they recognize me? The man shouted. Ning looked to the side as well and saw nearly 6 different people in dark clothes coming towards them. Move and I'll kill you all, the man shouted at the newly arrived group. The group stopped and one of them got rid of the cloth around their face that was covering their identity. The moment the cover came off, the man's eyes went wide. Jiren? He couldn't help but ask in surprise. His daggers lowered a bit as he let his guard down for a moment before quickly picking it back up. Hello, Carlos, Jiren spoke. Jiren was a young man in his late 20s and had a rather handsome face. What are you doing here? Carlos asked. How did you recognize me? Recognize you? Haha, we haven't left you out of our sight since the moment you walked into the city. Your simple face change was not going to stop us from recognizing you at all, the young man said, as his eyes drifted towards the package in his hand. I see, Jiren said. So that's the thing everyone is so after. Is it really what the rumor says it is? The fuck does that have anything to do with you? Carlos asked. If I can get my hands on it, everything, Jiren said. Carlos' eyes narrowed. Are you going behind the boss's back? He asked. Fuck the boss. If I can get that, who cares about some stupid old bastard that knows nothing but to sit around and order us, Jiren said. I might as well kill him after I get that thing. So confident, for someone that is at the death's door, the man said. Oh. Jiren was surprised. And who's going to kill me? You and that kid over there? Hey. You overestimate yourself, Carlos said. I alone will be enough. Carlos tossed the box to Ning, who was just standing there. Ning grabbed the box and looked at the man. Take that to my boss in the next city. Listen for the keyword, loud silence, now go, Carlos shouted. Kid, you better hand that over, or my men will fillet you like fish on a cutting board, Jiren spoke. The men behind him did start to pull out their weapons as well. Ning looked at the 2 men and suddenly tossed the package to Jiren. I don't want anything to do with this. So, just take it, and leave me alone. Everyone that was there next to the river looked at Ning with different expressions on their faces. Carlos was angry, Jiren was surprised and amused, and the rest were happy if half their faces were anything to go by. Why the fuck did you give it to him? Carlos shouted. Are you with these bastards? I don't even know them, Ning said. I don't even know you. I'm not risking my life for somebody that wants me to smuggle something illegal to a goddamn mafia boss. It's not illegal, bastard. I told you so many goddamn times, Carlos shouted at Ning. Then what the hell is it? Ning asked. You want to see what it is? Jiren asked as he ripped open the packaging. Inside was a metal box surprisingly, which he opened simply by undoing the latch by its side. Then, he pulled out something that glowed with dull white light, that already brightened the walls of the metal box and the man's face. The man pulled it out and showed it for everyone to see. What was inside was a white, glowing piece of crystal that had multiple long and sharp crystals growing out at the top. The main block of the crystal itself was about 6 centimeters in diameter, with the crystals growing out being anywhere from 5 to 10 centimeters long. Pure essence crystal, the man said softly as he looked at the crystal in his hand. So, it really does exist. You bastard, Carlos shouted at Jiren as he looked at the crystal coming out. Someone leaked about the boss sending you to check on the new crystal mine somewhere around here, but I did not expect the crystal mine to actually be one for a pure essence crystal, Jiren spoke. No wonder you were so secretive about everything. Ning looked at the crystal with a rather confused look on his face. He was following most of what was being said, but he also had some confusion. Most importantly because he didn't realize that such crystals existed in the first place. At the very least, the fisherman told him nothing about it. This is fantastic, the man said as he looked at the crystal in his hand. With this, I can easily reach the essence manifestation realm and be able to fight the boss one-on-one in just a year or 2. With the quality of this essence, my realm break will be very smooth, and the power I will acquire would be far vaster than anyone in 1,000 miles. You bastard, Carlos shouted. Like hell I will let you do that. And you're going to stop me, Carlos? The man asked. I have 5 men helping me today. You will die if you try to fight me. Ning was curious about the pure essence crystals, and especially the mine for it. But he was not curious enough to possibly kill himself for it. This has nothing to do with me, he thought, and decided to leave the place before it became a battlefield. There was already some explosion going on in the city, so he knew better than to stick around and find out what was going to happen next. You guys do what you want, I'm leaving, Ning said and turned around. Stop, Jiren spoke. At the same time, 2 of his men went around to block Ning's exit, with metal swords of their own. What do you want? Ning asked with a slightly serious face. Where do you think you are going? Jiren asked. Away from here, Ning said. I gave you the box. What do you want from me now? That you did, Jiren said. But you also saw my face. If you were to tell the boss about me before I can get strong, I will die. I can't let you do that. I don't even know what sort of gang you guys are, Ning shouted. How the hell would I talk to your boss? I don't care. You know too much today, so you die, Jiren said. Kill him. Ning's face darkened with a frown as one of the men in front of him charged with his sword up high, ready to swing. Before the man could swing it down, however, Ning moved and punched him in his solar plexus. The man involuntarily breathed out all the air in his lung and tried to breathe in again. He let go of his sword due to the pain, which Ning grabbed and stabbed the man through the neck. The other man realized something was bad and moved at the same time. He attacked Ning way better than the first man, but even that wasn't enough. Ning blocked the sword with his own and parried it before kicking the man in the stomach. The man fell back in pain and Ning took the chance to drive the sword through his stomach as well. The man still tried to slash at him with what power he had, but Ning stomped on his arm, making it impossible for him to use a sword anymore. Then, he pulled out the sword and stabbed it through the man's heart. Jiren and the rest watched with wide eyes as 2 of their men died at once. Now, only 4 of them were remaining. Carlos took the opportunity and charged with his fire and water daggers. Jiren looked around in time to see Carlos arrive next to him. He dropped the crystal and pulled out the shield on his back as he poured some essence into it. The earthen shield suddenly created a highly realistic illusion of an earth wall in front of him that blocked a slash of fire and water that came from Carlos's daggers. You 3, take care of the kid, Jiren shouted as he brought out a fire sword of his own, one that was very bright. I will take care of Carlos. I would love to see you try, you bastard, Carlos shouted as his fire and water dagger started glowing in bright colors as well. Ning wanted to look at the battle, but his own was coming right up. Carlos swung his fire dagger, sending out a burst of flame toward Jiren. Jiren moved his water shield in front of him, and a water blast stopped the fire from approaching. He then swung his own fire sword, sending a spray of fire at Carlos. Carlos took the flame dagger and sent a spray of fire of his own. He struggled a bit in the match as the fire that was used to make his dagger wasn't as much as the fire that was used to make Jiren's sword. As such, the spray of fire coming from Jiren was much stronger than his own. Thankfully, his dagger stopped most of the flames, and the ones it couldn't stop weren't strong enough to reach him at all, and instead directly went up into the air. Carlos jumped to the side and slashed with his water dagger. A crescent-shaped water flew through the air, coming at Jiren. Jiren stopped the water attack before it reached him by sending a spray of water at the attack. The attack was still strong enough to make its way out of the spray, but then it stuck the shield and did no damage to him at all. The 2 of them continued fighting with each other, using this essence weapon to attack each other with fire and water attacks. Meanwhile, the remaining 3 others arrived in front of Ning. Ning looked at the 3 of them and looked at their weapons. Fortunately, it didn't look like the 3 held any essence weapons, but they still had metal swords and daggers with them, that would cut him all the same. The man on the right charged at him first, very careful as they had seen what he was capable of. He stabbed from afar, and stayed out of Ning's reach. Ning struck the sword away with his own metal sword that he had taken from the first guy he killed. He tried moving forward towards the man, but another one to his left swung at him. He turned around in time and struck the sword away. Then, he dodged the next sword's attack and sliced at the 3rd man that attacked him. The man moved back in time and dodged his attacks as well. When he was trying to think how to kill at least one of them, the first man attacked once more. He started fighting the three of them at once and could only hold his own against the three in front of him. He was afraid that if he let his guard down, he would get hurt. In that case, he wouldn't know what to do to heal himself at all. There most likely were ways, but he wasn't aware of them for sure. Bleeding at the moment would be disastrous. He saw through his omnidirectional vision that Jaren and Carlos' fight was still continuing, but Carlos seemed to be slowly losing his edge. If it continued, Carlos would most likely die, and then Jaren would come after him. Ning wondered if he had it in him to ignore the fight and run away. However, he couldn't lie to himself that if possible, he would want to save Carlos. I'll have to get out of this situation first though, Ning thought. He struck one sword after another, perfectly parrying each one as they landed. The three people fighting him were shocked at how good his swordplay was. Ning was never a swordsman. His primary choice of weapon was always a spear, as that was what he had used for most of his life. However, that was not to say that he had never used a sword at all. His hundreds of thousands of years alive, he had used a sword long enough to be more than a lifetime's worth for most people. That was to say, he was a more capable swordsman than any of the people in front of him. The battle had gotten monotonous, with Ning defending himself while the three tried to cut him. Ning was able to continuously defend himself, not making a single mistake, while the three were not above that. Ning saw the first mistake after 2 minutes of fighting. The three of them had been attacking him one after another, which had kept him in a defensive stance. However, right this second, 2 of the 3 attackers were attacking at once. Ning noticed it and dashed to the side, approaching the third person. The third person wasn't expecting his arrival at all, and his swing had to change mid-preparation, so he was flustered. Ning took the opportunity and stabbed the man in the throat. He sent his whole body into the attack so that the man's swing wouldn't hit him at all. The 2 of them fell to the ground, with Ning on top of the man. Ning looked to the side and saw the closest one approaching him. He quickly pulled out the sword and tossed it toward the man. The man struck the sword aside and continued his charge at Ning. Ning had thrown his sword at him, and the dead man's sword was behind him, so he was plenty confident about killing the helpless Ning. He arrived right on top of Ning and slashed downwards. However, before he could fully attack Ning, a dagger went up through the man's jaw straight into his skull. Ning stepped aside and watched the man fall. He had taken the first dead man's dagger without being noticed and killed the second man. Then, he took the second dead man's sword and looked at the final remaining person. He gave an evil smile, terrifying the last remaining opponent. However, before he could attack, he put his sword to the side to block the burst of water that had flown at him. Then, Jaren came charging at him and swung his sword. Ning put his sword up and blocked it, but the fiery sword wasn't so easy to stop. He watched in surprise as the metal sword in his hand started to heat up and even deform in the location where it contacted the fiery sword. Ning moved back and stared at his sword, which had a dent on what should have been the edge. The blade of the sword itself was bent, so he tossed it aside. "You're quite good at this," Jaren said with a not-so-happy face. He was angry at the sight of his men dying. Ning looked toward Carlos, who was next to the wall of the house. He seemed to have struck the wall and couldn't move anymore. "Look at me when I'm talking to you," Jaren shouted as he sent out a massive burst of fire on Ning's way. Ning ducked at the last second, and the fire darkened the outer wall with black residue. "Who are you exactly? Are you part of our gang too?" the man asked. "I'm not with your little gang," Ning said. "He was just giving me a job because I needed one." "Oh, nice lie," Jaren said. "I'm not," Ning said. "Are you now?" Jaren asked. "Whatever, it doesn't really matter, does it? After all, you killed my people, so all you can do now is die too." Ning frowned and looked at the sword in Jaren's hands. If he was struck by it, he was most likely going to burn alive. He did not want that. "What do I do?" he thought. "Think, Ning, think." He looked at Jaren's fiery sword once more and then at his shield. Fire and water essence, he thought. How were they using the fire and water essence exactly? Ning had learned something about essence weapons from the shop he was at yesterday. The reason an essence weapon was rare and expensive, aside from the fact that it was hard to acquire, was the fact that it was very sought after. The reason why these weapons were so sought after had nothing to do with the fact that they could be used as weapons, but rather that they could be used to use one's essence inside of them. For the first 3 realms on one's essence journey, they could not use essence on their own at all. It was always at the 4th realm, the essence manifestation realm, that one finally was able to use their essence on their own. Before that, if they wanted to use the essence, they had to rely on a conduit. Natural conduits existed, but they were very rare. Essence weapons, on the other hand, were man-made conduits that allowed one to channel their essence and turn it into an element of the conduit. The conversion rate of essence with these man-made conduits wasn't as high, but they were high enough that everyone owned one. Sometimes, people even owned multiple ones, as Jaren and Carlos did. Ning owned one as well, the earthen sword, and now he was wondering if he could also use the sword as a conduit. He wasn't wondering if it was possible or not, but rather if he could do it or not. He hadn't practiced that just yet and was worried he couldn't do it. But worrying wasn't going to help him at all, so he reached his waist and pulled the sword out. The sword came out wrapped in the loose cloth, which he quickly got rid of, revealing the earth sword. Jaren's eyes narrowed when he saw the sword and gave a nasty little smirk. "I knew you weren't normal," he said. "To own an essence sword, you can't be an ordinary man." He prepared his weapons. "Now, you will tell me who you are exactly. If you don't, I will burn your leg first, then your arms, and finally your head," the man said. Ning looked straight at him, but his eyes weren't seeing anything. His whole attention had gone to his body, which he was using to search for essence deep within him. He knew that he definitely had some essence in him. After all, he had reached the 1st realm of every essence user's journey, the physical improvement realm. His body was stronger, faster, and more agile, so he knew he had improved. The only question now was if he could find the essence deep within him. "Hey, are you listening to me?" Jaren asked when he noticed that Ning's eyes weren't focusing on him at all. "This bastard, he's not paying attention to me at all," he shouted. "Very well then, you can die now." He thrust his sword forward and sent out a massive flame spray toward Ning. At the same time, Ning's eyes shined as he felt something move in his body. The essence in his body entered his sword through his hand. The essence mixed with the earthen energy in the sword, and Ning imagined an earth attack emerging from the sword. Just as he thought that something did appear out of the sword. Ning looked at the thing that appeared out of nowhere, and his eyes went wide. Jaren looked at what had appeared and his eyes went wide as well. Carlos, who was looking from the side, was shocked to the point that he wondered if he had already died, or if he had been hit in the head too hard and was now hallucinating. What had appeared out of nowhere was a massive rock that was larger than the house they were next to. It not only appeared but flew toward Jaren. The flame spray struck the massive rock, doing barely anything to it at all. He used his water shield as well, but that didn't do anything either. Both Jaren and the other man next to him turned around to run away, but before they could make it anywhere, the rock landed on them, and immediately crushed them to death. Ning's eyes remained wide in shock as he looked at the massive rock and then at his sword. He couldn't believe what he was seeing at all. "Is that what this sword is made up of?" He couldn't help but ask. If that was the case, then he could finally understand why 15 different people were not able to pick the sword up at all. Both Carlos and Ning continued watching in surprise at the massive rock that had appeared out of nowhere and watched until it disappeared into thin air. What remained was the crushed bodies of the 2 people that were caught underneath the rock. Not only the bodies but even the essence sword and shield were destroyed. Only their hilt and a small disc of the shield remained. "Yikes," Ning exclaimed when he saw the bodies and turned around. "What the hell happened to the rock?" Carlos looked at Alex with a shocked look on his face. "How did you do it?" he asked. "What?" Ning asked. How did you make that rock?" he asked. Ning shrugged. "I don't really know. I was just thinking of attacking them with a big rock and that thing appeared," he said. Carlos's eyes drifted from Ning to his sword, and Ning noticed that. "What? Do you want to steal my sword?" Ning asked. "I might be tempted to give it to you if you tell me where I can find that crystal mine of yours." "What?" Carlos looked back up. "What do you want with the mine?" "Sounds like a good place to improve my essence rank, you know," Ning said. "So, are you going to tell me where it is at all?" Carlos slowly held out his daggers once more. "I would rather kill myself than tell you where it is," he spoke. "Damn, all right," Ning said and turned around. He started wrapping his sword once more. "Thanks for the money, I guess. I will go get a sheath for my sword and buy a few more things." I'm really curious about this world, you know. You're leaving? The man asked. Of course, Ning said. There's no reason to stay here anymore. Especially since the guards might be coming here, you know. They won't, Carlos said. That explosion from earlier, they will be gathered there. Ning thought for a moment and nodded. You're right, he said. Still, I don't plan on staying around a place with so many dead people. He looked towards the road that was hidden by the house. I suspect people have heard the commotion and reported it already. Carlos couldn't deny that. He quickly picked up the crystal that Jaren had thrown close by when the fight started. He found that there was no packaging to pack it in and simply wrapped it around his tunic. So, what are you exactly? Someone from some other gang? Carlos asked. Huh? No, I'm a nobody really, Ning said as he walked away from the place. Carlos followed him. You don't strike me as a nobody, Carlos said. I don't think you were trying to steal this from me. You didn't even know about it, so I'm curious why someone so strong like you would be looking for a job. Huh? I'm not strong at all, Ning said. It is my sword that was strong. Oh right. Do you know why the rock disappeared so suddenly? Carlos thought for a moment. Are you only in the physical improvement realm? He asked. I'm afraid so, Ning said. Then it is because your essence wasn't strong enough to exist as a physical element for too long, Carlos said. Don't you know what? Nope, Ning said. I know nothing about anything. Carlos was surprised someone could admit to their ignorance so proudly. Anyway, if you're not gonna tell me about the mine, then goodbye, Ning said and walked towards the other side of the city. Carlos quickly followed behind. Wait, he shouted. What now? Ning asked without stopping at all. Carlos quickly ran up to him and walked next to him. I have enemies in the city and they are most likely waiting for me outside, he said. Can you please help me? Dude, I told you, I don't want to help you deliver some package, Ning said. I have no interest in that. What if I add more earth coins? Carlos asked. I will give you 30. Ning stopped. 30? He asked while thinking how good that was. No, I would rather have the crystals themselves. I bet they would sell for way more. Carlos frowned. He needed to get Ning on this side any way he could. Fine 50, he said. And you won't have to deliver it. I will do it, you just need to be my guard. And I'll even put a good word with the boss to help you get into the gang. You okay with that? Ning paused. 50? He asked. Carlos nodded. How dangerous is the job? He asked. Nothing more than what you just went through, Carlos said. That's all right, you got yourself a deal, Ning said. When do we leave? Right now, Carlos said. Ning looked at him weirdly. You got the money here? He asked. Yes, Carlos said as he brought out a pouch from his pockets. Ning glimpsed the 2 daggers hidden underneath his tunic as well. What else do you need to grab before we leave? Ning asked. I doubt I have anything of those sorts anymore, Carlos said with a slight frown. What do you mean? Ning asked. That explosion from earlier, I suspect that it was for me, Carlos said. They have most likely exploded the place I was renting to stay. Damn, Ning thought. They must really care about the crystal enough to come after you. Yes, Carlos said. Now, can we leave? Sure, Ning said, but money first. Carlos frowned and pulled out the pouch from before. He opened the pouch and pulled out 25 different brown coins. Here, he handed it over to Ning. 25? You said 50, Ning said. Half now, half later, Carlos said. Ning looked at the coin and sighed. Fine, half later, he said and pocketed the coins. He had already received 35 coins just this morning, so he was more than happy. Now that you've received the money, can we go? Carlos asked. Sure, Ning said. Lead the way. Carlos and Ning got onto a carriage that could handle about 6 different people, but only the 2 of them were on it. Carlos had paid off the driver for the whole carriage so they could get some privacy. Ning placed his sword to the side and sat on one side of the carriage with one leg on top of another. The carriage rattled, but he had been in way too many of these things to really care about some rattling carriage. Carlos closed the blinds on the carriage's windows and sneaked a glance outside from time to time by opening it a little. Damn, man. You're worrying way too much, Ning said. Just chill, okay? I can't just chill, okay, Carlos said. My life is on the fucking line here. So many people are after me. Can't you like hear the people if they get too close or something? Ning asked. That's what the essence sense realm is about, right? Carlos turned towards Ning. I can't sense them if they hide it very well, he said. Or if they choose to come through a place that is heavy with essence. Like if someone comes from the river? Ning asked. Is that why you couldn't sense that Jaren dude and the others approach? Carlos nodded. I see, Ning said. The more information I learn, the better. Anyway, tell me about this gang of yours. I am very curious about your gang and your boss. My boss is a secret I can never tell you about. As for my gang, we call ourselves the Paradise Hunters, Carlos explained. We are a big gang, one of the biggest in the Crowler Empire. Crowler Empire, is that where we are on right now? Ning asked. Carlos gave a weird look when he heard that question. How do you not know that? He asked. Ning shrugged. I lost all my memories, so I don't know where I am right now. A few fishermen dragged me out of the ocean with this sword in hand. So I'm trying to learn more about the world and see if it jogs my memories. Whoa. Carlos said with a surprised look. I did not expect such a backstory from you. Forget about me, continue with yours, Ning said. Okay. Carlos continued. The Paradise Hunters consists of over 500 members, not including people that just work for the gang. Although, none of us really know who we work for. Our boss is just that secretive. And you still work for such a boss? Ning asked. Carlos nodded. A month or so ago, the boss came across a small piece of information, he said. Someplace, close to the Frailheart City, there was a large deposit of pure essence crystals and he made his underlings find out if that was true or not. I was one of them who was made to search the site and bring back a sample piece to report to the boss, he said. But, it seems other people somehow got the wind of it, and not just the other gangs are after the location, even some members of our own gang are after it. Ning gave a curious look as he heard it all. Have you ever seen the boss? He sounds secretive, he said. Not directly, Carlos said. We don't get to see their faces, but we do hear him. The boss is currently in Greyfire City, waiting for me to return with the crystal. I suspect I will finally be allowed to see how he looks exactly. I see, Ning said. And you think you can put a good word in for me? Of course, Carlos said. Are you interested? No, not really, Ning said. Especially since it sounds like you're a group of criminals. We are not, damn it, Carlos couldn't deny. I try not to do anything really bad. Whatever, Ning said. Carlos sighed and turned around to look outside once again. Ning sighed as well and was about to close his eyes to rest for a moment when he noticed something. Hey, what's wrong with your neck? He asked. My, what? Carlos turned towards Ning. Your neck, Ning said as he gestured to his own neck. It looks like you were cut. Your skin is coming to off, let me check. He got up and got close, but Carlos quickly stopped him. No need, just stay. I'm not hurt, he said. Huh? But your skin is flapping, Ning said. No, it's, Carlos felt the flap and smushed it onto his neck. However, the flap continued popping out. Shit, the adhesive is gone. What's going on with your skin? Ning asked. It's not my skin, Carlos said. It's fake skin, which isn't working anymore. Carlos slid his fingers into the flap and pulled out the skin, very much surprising Ning. It was not just his neck where the fake skin was, but his face and his hair too. When he pulled it off, it came off entirely, revealing a rather handsome-looking face with dark blonde hair underneath. The man looked no older than in his early 20s, rather than the middle-aged he looked earlier. His acne-scarred cheeks were also gone, revealing a smooth face underneath. Shit, this is bad, he said. I don't know. I think you look quite good this way, Ning said. Huh? No, I meant bad because everyone will recognize me now. At least previously I had a mask to hide behind while on the road, Carlos said. And was that helping? Ning asked. Didn't the place you were staying at get attacked? Hell, you yourself were attacked. That, I suppose you're right, Carlos said. Think of it this way, Ning said. Either you are going to get attacked, or you are not going to get attacked. Either way, you being so hyper scared isn't going to change the situation. Just chill and we'll see if we do get attacked, Ning said. If we do, we'll fight back. If we don't, we continue chilling until we reach the next city. How long does it take to reach the next city again? Ning asked. It would take half a day by foot, but on a carriage this fast, we should reach there in less than 3 hours, Carlos said. Ning sighed and rested. I should just sleep for the time being then, he said, and was about to lay back when he felt his body jolt forward as the carriage came to a halt. What the? He looked around. Carlos quickly opened the window blinds and looked out. Hey, why did you stop? He asked the person in the front. Dear sir, all the carriages have stopped. Something to the front seems to be burning, the man said. Burning? Carlos frowned. What the hell is? Suddenly, something struck them from behind, causing the two of them to slam into the back of the carriage. Ning hit the carriage door so hard that he flew out of it and landed on the ground outside. Ugh! He cried a bit and tried to stand up, but before he did, a man was already on top of him with his sword ready to attack him. Ning saw the sword move down and quickly rolled to the side. At the same time, there were a few people on the carriage that seemed to have slammed into them that were coming out with bows and arrows. Carlos! Ning shouted to alert him, but it looked like he didn't need to. Carlos arrived out of the carriage with his 2 daggers in hand. You bastards, he shouted. You dare attack us out in the open? Fire! The man with the sword shouted at his friends that had the bows. A volley of arrows shot out immediately, but Carlos hid inside the carriage. The arrows stuck to the wooden wall of the carriage. Let me show you what real fire looks like, Carlos shouted as he quickly jumped back out of the carriage, right in front of the man. The man tried to move his sword, but it was stopped by Carlos's water dagger. As for his fire dagger, she stabbed the man with it. Then, he let it burn. A plume of fire burst from behind the man, charring his chest and the surrounding area immediately. He fell to the ground, next to Ning, who had managed to get out of there. Cries of shock and panic rang from the road as people in other carriages ran as far away as they could from the two that were there. You okay? Carlos asked. Yes, Ning said. Surprisingly, I don't feel pain at all. Where's your sword? Carlos asked. Inside, Ning said, and quickly jumped into the carriage to get his sword. In the meantime, the people on the other carriage had finished loading their bows and arrow. Surrender, Carlos, another man from inside the carriage shouted. He came out holding a sword that seemed to be made up of beach sand. Tell us where you acquired it, and we will let you live. Carlos's eyes narrowed. Hansen, huh? Did Jaren get to you too? He asked. Jaren? He was a nobody. Why would he get to me? Hansen asked. Then why are you after what the boss wants? Why do you want to go behind his back? Do you really think that you can escape the boss's reach just because you have a single mind? Carlos asked. We don't fear the boss, Hansen said. Why would someone who even fears to show his own face to his own people fear us? Just because he's then boss, doesn't mean that he can't be overthrown. You underestimate the boss way too much, Carlos said. And you overestimate him too much, Hansen said. Do you think the boss can live to see another day when Dale, Bordick, and Firepalm are all coming to get him today? Carlos' eyes went wide. What? He shouted in surprise. You heard me right, Hansen said. We have notified the other gang's bosses of the boss's presence in Greyfire City. After today, he won't be alive at all. At such a period in time, don't you wish that you were on our side? Carlos wasn't thinking about Hansen's offer at all. His entire being was only thinking about the boss's situation. 3 other gang bosses were coming for him, and they knew where he was today. You bastard, Carlos shouted. After all the boss did for us. After you got a job, a shelter, a family, you still dare betray him. Tisk, 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 Carlos. Why does it sound like you're refusing the offer? Hansen asked. It sounds like that because he is refusing the offer, Ning said as he walked out of the carriage with his sword in hand. HMPH. Who the hell are you to butt in on this conversation? Hansen asked. Me? Ning asked. I am his bodyguard, and I am getting paid to take him to Greyfire City. So, if you won't mind us, we will be killing you quickly so we can go on our merry way. Kill that bastard, Hansen said to the archer next to him. Ning swung his sword before the archer could release his arrow, and a fist-sized rock flew through the air, striking the archer right on his face. Arg! The archer cried in pain as he clutched onto his face. Hansen looked shocked, but he quickly gathered himself and turned around. Kill them! He shouted as he used his sword to blast sand toward Ning and Carlos. Get behind me, Ning said as he stabbed his sword onto the ground, and out from it came 3 massive rock spikes that were enough to block all the direct attacks. The sand still spread onto the afterward, but the main attack was blocked. The attacks stopped after 2 seconds, and a second after that, Ning's rocks that had appeared in front of them disappeared as well. Since their opponents were reloading and the pathway was empty in front of them, Ning dashed forward to go attack them. Ning was surprised at how fast his dash was. For a body that was nowhere close to being as strong as his other one, this was surprisingly great. Some of the fighters on the enemy noticed him coming out of the massive amounts of sand on the ground and tried to shout at him. But before they could say anything to warn the others, Ning swung his sword while putting as much essence into the attack as he could. The sword cut through the wooden carriage as easily as carving through butter. It only stopped when it struck the ground and went nearly half a meter deep into it. Then, his essence went to work. A massive pillar of stone jumped out of the ground, sending the destroyed carriage into the air. It reached over 10 meters high in just a second, sending the people on it scattering everywhere. Some landed in the field by the road, some landed on other carriages, and a few fell directly onto the road they were in. Carlos moved at the same time and arrived in front of Hansen. Before Hansen could do anything, he stuck his water sword into his mouth and started flooding his mouth with water. The pressure causes the water to come out of Hansen's nose, and at the same time, he breathed in a massive amount of it, filling up his lungs in the process. Carlos moved towards the others and used his fire swords to attack them. Ning moved as well, killing a few of the others that were trying to find their bows and arrows to shoot at them. Once they were done, they returned to Hansen, who was choking on the water as breathing was impossible for him anymore. Ning watched awkwardly as Hansen drowned on the dry land and Carlos moved to pick up his sword. "That was something," Ning said as he watched the dead man slowly turn pale after death. "Let's go," Carlos said, not looking back at all. "We need to go to the city fast to warn the boss." "Well, I don't know how we can do that, with such a long line," Ning said, looking at the carriages that were left behind, causing traffic. "Our own carriage is broken too, and the driver is gone." "Damn these bastards, causing needless problems," Carlos shouted. "We will need to just run now and maybe catch a ride somewhere far away." "You really want to run all the way to the other city?" Ning asked with a hesitating look. "We don't have any other choice," Carlos said. "I need to warn the boss about the attack." "Arg. Fine," Ning sighed. "I haven't eaten anything this morning really, so I will warn you that I might get hungry. I'll put a feast in your name when we reach the city. With the money you get, you will be able to buy as much as you want for yourself too," Carlos said. "I get it," Ning said. "Let's go save your stupid boss." The two of them started running away. A few people pointed at them as they ran, remembering them as the two that killed people today. "Sigh, I'm going to have to get away from this place now," Ning thought. He continued on his way, hiding his face as much as possible. The road up ahead was mostly empty on one side as the accident from earlier had left it completely open, so the two of them could run on flat land without having to suffer running on uneven terrain. Ning was surprised at how high his endurance was as he ran hundreds and hundreds of meters without experiencing any shortness of breath. For a body he created about a month ago that hadn't gone through any sort of physical training aside from the essence rank, he was rather strong. "I wonder how strong I am," he thought. It was hard to judge against others he had fought with as they were not in the physical improvement realm the same as him. If he wanted to test himself, he would have to do it with hard numbers, but if he had to guess, he was at least 5 to 7 times as strong as a normal person. That was judging based on just the speed too. He wondered what other improvement his body had had by now. "I'm surprised you can keep up with me," Carlos said. "You don't remember how you got this strong?" "I have no idea," Ning said as he ran. "After you join the gang, I will help you find out about your past," Carlos said. "Thank you," Ning said. "All right, eyes up front. We'll have to go through this forest for a shortcut," Carlos said. Ning looked towards the forest around which the road seemed to curve. "People won't be waiting for you in there, would they? They seem extremely envious of that crystal and would go above and beyond for it." "With such a massive forest, it's impossible," Carlos said. "Still, just keep your eyes out." Ning nodded and they continued. Fortunately, there weren't any nefarious people waiting for them in the forest. The forest wasn't that big either, and they passed through it in about half an hour, saving about half an hour had they just run on the normal road. When they came out on the other side, both of them were finally starting to feel the shortness of breath from running for so long. Carlos stopped an empty carriage on the street. It was hard to tell if the carriage driver stopped because he was a good person, or because he was afraid of the two random people that had come out of the forest with naked swords in their hands. Either way, he let them on the carriage and took them on their way to the Gray Fire City. An hour later, the two of them could see the houses grow denser and denser, and not long after that, they saw a river. They got off and turned toward the river. Just past it, they would find Greyfire City. "We're here," Carlos said as he looked at the city from the other side of the river. Ning stood next to him as well, looking at the bridge that was mostly filled with other people. "So, what now?" Ning asked. "Do I get paid or is there some more work?" "I need to get the crystal to the boss," Carlos said. "But I don't know who exactly I can trust right now. Anyone could have betrayed the boss and is waiting for us in ambush." "So, no?" Loud silence, Ning asked. "I can't trust anyone, even if they know the secret code. I must go meet the boss himself and hand over the crystal and information to him," Carlos said. "So you know where he is?" Ning asked. Carlos nodded. "Let's go," he said and started walking. Ning placed his sword through the belt around his tunic to hold it for now. There was no cloth that was wrapping the sword, so he had to be careful not to be seen by some city guard or he would be in some more trouble. Although, he had enough money to make a sheath for his sword. The two crossed the river and arrived on the other side. Ning glanced to either side of the river and noticed some people that were standing around there doing nothing. He looked towards Carlos, who was staring at one person in particular. The person looked back and waited for Carlos to approach him. However, Carlos ignored the man and increased his pace. "Let's go," he said to Ning, moving faster and faster. Not even a minute later, Carlos was taking Ning through alleyways, rather than the city roads, as those were much better shortcuts to reaching the gang's hiding place. Not only that, it also hid them from city guards, which was a very much needed benefit right now. After going through 4 different alleyways, climbing over 2 different walls, and running across 2 major roads, Ning and Carlos finally arrived in front of what looked like a tavern. It was the middle of the day right now, but the tavern was still full of people drinking and shouting. Carlos ignored the drunkards as much as he could, while Ning held his sword at the ready for any random attacks. Carlos went up to the tavern manager and said, "We would like to make use of your finest rooms." The tavern manager was a middle-aged woman with thick, brown hair. She put down the jug she was wiping and looked at the two of them. "You can't get something fine just by asking for it," she said. "I'm willing to hunt for it," Carlos said. "Good," the woman said. "Clara, come help show these hunters to their paradise." A woman came from the back that was barely in her early 20s. She wore modest clothes with her pitch-black hair in 2 braids that hung down to her lower back. Her eyes were black as well, through which she stared at the two of them. Carlos seemed unfazed, but Ning felt a little awkward as the girl stared at him more than she did Carlos. The girl named Clara turned around and started walking away. Carlos quickly followed her and gestured for Ning to follow her as well. "Do you still need me?" Ning asked as he walked along. "Isn't everything basically done?" "Not until I hand over the crystal," Carlos said. "Also, I plan on telling the boss about you, so it will be easier if you are there with me when I explain stuff to him." "Yeah, but I'm not sure if I want." "Less talking, more walking," the girl from the front said and took a left turn, going downstairs into an underground lair. They followed her through a large hallway, before coming into a room that was glowing with light that was captured from outside. The room was rather small and mostly empty. The girl moved to one side of the room and stood by the wall, next to a man that was already there. Carlos and Ning stood in the center, and Ning could see a silhouette of another person behind a very thin curtain that stood between them and another section of the wall. A bunch of rocks suddenly appeared around Ning while he was looking at the silhouette, trapping him in it. He tried to move, but he found it rather hard to do so. Carlos turned around and then turned toward the man next to the wall. "Free him." "You know I can't do that, don't you?" The man spoke. "I'm not sure why you brought him here, but he's not a member of the gang, so he will have to stay that way. Don't worry, unless I find a reason to, I won't kill him." Carlos frowned slightly but said nothing else. "You'll have to stay that way for a bit, brother," he said. Ning was annoyed by the situation, but there was nothing he could do. "Why are you here, Carlos?" The man spoke. You were supposed to find the crystal and hand it over to the ones that were waiting for you. I don't trust them, Carlos said. The man frowned a little. You found it okay to come to see the boss just because you couldn't bring yourself to trust in the members of your own organization? 2 of our members tried to kill me today, and many other no-name ones were with them too, Carlos said while looking at the man. The last thing I would do is trust ones I don't fully know. I'm sorry, Brother Kepler, but I don't trust you either. I can only trust the boss today. You were attacked? Kepler asked with a chilling look on his face. By Jaren and Hansen, Carlos said, and I doubt they are alone in betraying the gang today. This is one reason I came to rush to the boss today. I have important news for him. What news? Kepler asked. Boss, Carlos spoke directly to the person behind the curtain. Dale, Bodrick, and Firepalm are all coming after you. What did you say? Kepler asked when he heard the words from Carlos. Hansen and the others have told the other gang bosses that you are here, boss. You need to leave as soon as you can, Carlos said. I have no idea who else is in on it, so you have to be careful not to trust anyone else. The figure behind the curtains moved silently, but it said nothing. How confident are you? Kepler asked. Hansen spoke those words to me to try and dissuade me to come to his side, so there's a chance he could be lying too, Carlos said. But I don't think the boss should be taking that chance. How do we know you're not in on it, and that the friend you've brought along is actually one of the people that are trying to kill the boss? Kepler said. Don't trust me then, Carlos said. This friend is someone who saved me twice today. If not for him, I would have died to both Jaren and Hansen. He currently has some memory loss, so I was hoping to use the gang's influence to try and find where he's from. You brought him here for that? Kepler asked. That, and I was hoping to have him join the gang. He's strong, Carlos said. He's a physical improvement realm kid, Kepler said. Yes, and he's strong, Carlos said, only looking at the boss, who didn't speak. But he's still a... Kepler stopped talking when he saw the boss move. The boss's silhouette gestured for him to move on with the matter. All right. Enough talk about him. It's time to talk about the crystal, Kepler said. Bring it out so we can see that you at least did what you were asked to do. The boss nodded on the other side of the curtain. Ning looked at the silhouette as well and tried to understand why the boss was being so quiet. He had heard the boss give orders, but for some reason he wasn't speaking at all this time around, only moving his body slowly, like a puppet. Ning's eyes went wide. Carlos, stop, he said. Carlos, who was reaching to the back of his belt where he had stuck the crystal, paused and looked back towards Ning. The boss, Ning said. He's not talking. Confirm the boss is alive. Carlos's head quickly spun around to the silhouette which was still moving. Boss? Are you really there? He asked. He slowly used his essence sense to sense for his boss, and while he did notice the essence from the area, it wasn't necessarily from a living body. Kepler frowned. Stop being stupid, he said. The boss is here. Just take your crystal out and let us see how good it is. No, Carlos said. Not until we talk to the boss. As long as the boss says something, I'll hand it over. You blustering idiot, Kepler shouted. The boss is alive and well. He just doesn't want to talk right now. Just bring out the crystal so we can be done with this. Carlos dropped the sand sword he had taken from Hansen's corpse and brought out his 2 daggers. Kepler was getting angry now. You stupid fucking Doombas. A loud explosion sounded from somewhere in the building. From what they could all hear, it was from the floor above them. The hell is happening up there? Kepler shouted. Just as they said that the wooden roof croaked, and then the entire upper floor came caving in on them. Carlos jumped to the side and Ning was close enough to the door that the debris didn't come close to him at all. Kepler on the other hand was trapped underneath the rubble. Carlos got back up and looked up in fear. He got behind Ning and stuck his dagger into the rock constriction he was in. I'll break you out, he spoke softly. Don't bother, Ning said. I could get out whenever I wanted to. At some point early on, Ning realized that since his body was in contact with his sword, he could use essence to get rid of the stone if he wanted to. He had only stuck around in it so Kepler wouldn't kill him for acting out. Above the rubble, 3 men stood, with one of them standing next to the corpse of the middle-aged woman from upstairs. Haha, so it was hidden so close to us, huh? To think we could get here so easily, one of them spoke. The man was middle-aged at best and his physique was in a state which could make any other men jealous. He didn't wear any upper body clothing and showed off his fine features. He held a massive hammer in his hand, which was made up of wood for the handle, and something fiery for the actual hammer itself. "You guys sure we didn't kill him already?" another man asked. This one wore a red ribbon around his forehead and held two single-handed axes in his hand, each of which seemed to be made out of fire and earth. The last man looked more intellectual than the other two. He had long flowing hair that was tied behind his back while he held a book in his hand. He held a simple staff in his hand, with a jewel attached to the end that was made up of water. Kepler grunted in pain and forced himself out of the debris. He made small gaps using rocks he created and crawled out. However, right as he was out, the man that was dual-wielding axes stepped on his back and stopped him from moving. "Is this the boss?" he asked. "His feature matches the one they called Kepler," the staff-wielding man said. "Oh, the boss's right-hand man, huh?" the man with the axes said. "Good to meet you, buddy. You know who I am, right?" "You attacked us, Bodrick," Kepler said through his grunted teeth. "You won't survive today." "Oh yeah? We'll see about that," he said and looked around. "Where's your boss?" "Come on, speak," Bodrick said. "Tell me where the boss is, or I'll have to torture all three of you." "The boss is not here," Kepler shouted while grunting in pain. Bodrick was still stepping on his ribs, which were starting to hurt by now. Carlos looked at what was going on in surprise. Was Kepler protecting the boss? Was he not in on it as well? As he thought, he looked toward where the boss was. The curtain had disappeared and beyond it lay nothing. There was no sign of any human there at all. Let alone a human, there wasn't even any essence on that side of the room. "Where's the boss?" he thought. "We need to leave," Ning said softly. "After they kill him, they will come after us." "Oh, we're coming after you no matter what," the man with the staff spoke as he turned toward Ning. Ning frowned when he realized that he had been heard. Just how good do their senses get? He thought. "Since you three are the ones here, you are probably the only ones who know about where the boss is," the man said. "Hey, speak up," Bodrick shouted at Kepler. "Keep this up, and I'll have Greyfire here smash your head in with his hammer. And I'm sure you know how bad that can get." Kepler's eyes moved toward the big man with the glowing red hammer. He knew something about Greyfire's hammer that others didn't. Most people saw his hammer and assumed that it was made using the essence of fire. However, it was in fact made using the essence of a fiery explosion. As such, each time the man used the hammer, it was an explosion appeared, not just fire. That was probably the reason why the roof had come caving in, but nothing was burning at all. "I don't know where you heard about it, but the boss isn't here. He never was. It was all a lie," Kepler said. "Oh, is that so?" Bodrick looked surprised. "Such a shame then. Hey, Grey. You want to do some smashing?" The bulky man walked forward. "Haha. I love smashing," he shouted as he arrived in front of Kepler. Kepler's eyes went wide as she saw the big man prepare his hammer. "Wait," he shouted. I'll tell you. "Come on," Greyfire shouted in disappointment. "I was just about to hit you too." "Speak quickly," the man with the staff said. "The boss," Kepler breathed heavily. "The boss is me." All three of the other bosses looked confused for a second. "You're joking," one of them said. "No, I am the boss of the Paradise Hunters. I act like my own right-hand man so no one finds out it is me," Kepler said. "What? That sounds dumb," Bodrick said. "It's dumb, right?" "It sure is," Greyfire said. "You know what's dumber?" "What?" Bodrick asked. "He spoke just now to stop me from killing him, but if he is the boss, we have more reason to kill him," Greyfire said. "You're right," Bodrick said. "This stupid idiot tried to save himself and instead is going to get killed. Such an idiot ended up making one of the strongest gangs of the Empire?" As he spoke, Bodrick felt like something was wrong. He was right. The man in front of him was stupid, but only if he were the boss. But if he wasn't, then he was lying to save the boss. Greyfire prepared to attack once again, but Bodrick put his axe before Greyfire. "Stop, I don't think he's the boss," he said. "Huh? Then what's wrong with killing him?" Greyfire asked. "Just wait," Bodrick said. "Oi, Dale. You're the smarter of us three. What do you think is happening here?" He waited for Dale to answer, but he heard nothing. Dale? He turned around and saw Dale standing still with his staff in his hand. He seemed to be lost in his own thought for some reason. Bastard. Are you daydreaming or what the fuck? Dale's eyes slowly opened and Bodrick couldn't help but feel creeped out when he saw it. Dale's eyes were completely pitch black from the iris to the whites. What the fuck is going on with you, dude? Dale asked. What the fuck is that? Greyfire turned around to see what was going on as well. Dale didn't speak or do anything at all. All he did was looked at the two men with his pitch black eyes, while holding his water staff. Ning managed to slowly make his way out of the rock's hold on him and looked at what was going on in front of him. The hell? He thought too when he saw the situation. Carlos was at a loss for words as well. He had no idea what was going on at all. Of the 5 people that were staring at Dale in the room, only one of them seemed to have any idea what was happening at all. You guys are fucked. Kepler shouted loudly even though his chest hurt to speak. The boss is taking direct actions against you all, so you better not hope of leaving him alive today. He started laughing maniacally, unnerving even Ning and Carlos as they stared at Dale and the others. Suddenly, Dale's head twitched for a moment and he dashed forward. He moved at an unbelievable speed and arrived in front of Bodrick and Greyfire in an instant. Bodrick attacked to block the incoming attack, but Dale's body twisted mid-dash and moved toward Greyfire in the last second. His staff came slamming down on Greyfire, who was ready with his own attack. The two attacks slammed against each other, and Greyfire's explosion sent all of them in different directions. They all got back up quickly, and the two bosses looked at the third boss with weird looks in their eyes. You, Bodrick spoke as he looked towards Dale. Are you the real boss of the Paradise Hunters? Bodrick's words surprised Greyfire, who was getting back up. What? That's Dale. Why would he be the boss of the Paradise Hunters? He asked. But he said. Bodrick looked toward Kepler for a split second before turning back toward Dale. Forget about it. If he's not the boss, then he's working for him. Either way, we have been backstabbed. I really don't like being backstabbed, Greyfire said. I think you should die for this, Dale. Dale stared at the two of them with his black eyes and his lips stretched until it formed a forced smile. His face seemed slightly darkened by the explosion, but everything else seemed fine. Carlos slowly moved toward Kepler and pulled him up. Kepler had some broken ribs, and his leg seemed to have fractured as well from the rubble. Brother Kepler, what is going on? Carlos asked. Just shut up and sit back. Boss will get rid of these two now, Kepler said. Carlos looked at the two that were focused on the third one and was surprised. That guy is our boss? He couldn't help but ask. Was he trying to act like he was here to kill himself? Did he just watch as these two killed their way into his own hideout? No, can't be, Carlos thought. It simply didn't make sense. But then again, who knew? Dale moved forward once again, attacking the person closest to him. Bodrick blocked the staff attack with his two axes and immediately used the earth axe to launch large stones at the man. Dale's body moved unnaturally, as it changed its dodged by bending sideways at the waist. It immediately got back into shape and slammed its staff at Bodrick. Bodrick wasn't ready for the attack and was nearly hit, but Greyfire's hammer arrived before Gale could hurt Bodrick. The hammer didn't explode this time around, only stopping the attack. He pulled back the hammer and Bodrick launched his own attack before Dale could attack again. The two of them attacked one after another, and Dale fought the both of them with very unusual movement. Something is off, Bodrick said. Yes, Greyfire agreed. He's not using his essence to fight at all. He's holding back for some reason. That or he can't use it at all, Bodrick said. Let me test which one it is. He dashed at Dale, who slammed his staff onto him. Bodrick dodged at the last second and hit Dale on the arm that was holding the staff as hard as he could. As he did that, he also used his essence to create a really sharp stone that formed from his essence that hit the arm as well. Dale attacked with his other arm at the last moment, punching Bodrick on the face as hard as he could. Bodrick staggered a few steps back as he held his face. That punch had hurt him very hard. But since he had taken away Dale's arm, he was okay with Wah. Bodrick stopped thinking for a moment when he saw what was in front of him. Greyfire's eyes widened in surprise, and a trace amount of fear. Hey, what in the living fuck is that? He shouted at Bodrick, who had no answer himself. Dale stood straight with his left fist bent the wrong way. As for his right arm that was torn off, for some reason there was now a black arm that seemed to have replaced the cut-off arm. The black arm seemed to drop wisps of black smoke with each movement. Carlos was at a loss for word and Kepler simply smiled at the situation. On the other hand, Ning had absolutely no idea what was even happening right now. There were too many things happening in too short a time for him to understand it without someone explaining him the situation. "That's shadow essence," Bodrick said when he finally realized what he was looking at. "That's a bloody shadow essence. How the fuck did we not know that Dale was a shadow essence user?" "He can't be," Greyfire said. "I've seen him only ever use water essence. Shadow essence is just too rare for him to not have made himself big with it." "Then what is going on?" Bodrick asked. "That is definitely shadow essence." That, Greyfire couldn't answer. "Whatever, let's kill him first. We'll deal with finding the answer later." The two of them immediately launched into the battle once more, attacking the wounded Gale who still was fighting back. However, now that they both knew that Gale wouldn't be using any essence, they fought him without holding back at all. Within just a few more attacks, Dale lost his other arm as well. Even then, the shadow arm appeared from his body, replacing the parts he lost. The two bosses attacked more and more, and Dale lost more and more body parts. However, with each lost part, a part made up of shadow essence would form to replace it. The two kept attacking a few more times and managed to take Dale's head. They waited for the head to be replaced too, but instead of that happening, Dale's shadow parts vanished, leaving just chunks of body parts that weren't damaged. The two bosses stepped back and looked in surprise. "It's over," Bodrick said. "He's finally dead," Greyfire said. "But, he died so easily. What was happening to his body? It looked like shadow essence had infiltrated his body, but who did it? You got any idea?" He waited for Bodrick to answer him, but Bodrick didn't speak at all. "You hear me?" Greyfire asked as he turned around to Bodrick. Bodrick slowly turned toward him as well and his face turned to a wide smile. He glared at Greyfire with open eyes that were entirely pitch black, just like Dale's. "What the foo?" Greyfire stumbled over himself while trying to move back in a hurry. He fell down on top of the rubble, but he quickly got back up and faced off Bodrick, who had now been taken over by Shadow, just as Dale was. "Hey, Bodrick. What's going on?" Greyfire asked as he prepared his hammer for one more fight. He looked around, trying to figure out what was going on, but all he could see was the three men huddled together. "Is this your doing?" Greyfire asked loudly as he pointed his explosive hammer at them. Carlos flinched a bit, but the other two showed no reaction to the question at all. Ning had no answer to give, and Kepler only laughed maniacally, to the point that he was starting to lose consciousness from all the flaring pain in his lungs from the laughing. Bodrick moved suddenly, but Greyfire was prepared for him. He swung his hammer and slammed onto Bodrick. The explosion tore his body apart, and what remained was a shadowy figure, half made up of human and half made up of shadow. To his surprise, the body still moved, albeit not as well as before. It looked like the shadow wasn't very good at holding together parts that weren't connected to each other themselves. Still, Bodrick's body moved with a single black eye still visible, slowly approaching Greyfire who had no plans to be attacked. He swung his hammer again and this time managed to kill the other boss he had come to this place with. When the explosion vanished, he alone remained. There were three of them when they entered, and now only a single one remained. "You bastard! Where the fuck are you hiding from me?" he shouted at the open wall. He didn't even consider that it was one of the three men that were the ones behind it all. There was just no way for that to be true. "Fine, don't come out," Greyfire said. "Just sit back and watch me kill your men." Kepler suddenly stopped laughing when he heard that, and both Ning and Carlos got tense as well. Carlos wasn't sure what he could do, but the boss was already walking towards them. "Stand back," Ning said as he put himself in front of the two. If he fought the man directly, he was most definitely going to die. The difference in their essence rank was just that much. "Brother Ning, stop." Carlos reacted finally after Ning had stepped forward. He pulled out his daggers as well, but it was too late already. Even Ning realized it was too late. He had been preparing his essence, but the man in front of him was too strong. "Guess that's a reset for my adventure then," he thought. He was going to go down, so he would go down fighting. He used whatever little essence he had managed and swung his sword at the incoming explosive hammer. Bang! An explosion rang in the room, sending dust falling from the open roof. Greyfire looked in front of him with confused eyes before slowly moving his head to look at his arm. He should have been holding the hammer with his two arms, but for some reason, his hammer wasn't completely there at all. All he could see was part of the handle that suggested that his hammer had been forcefully destroyed. Ning remained stunned as well. Everything happened so fast that he didn't even realize that his sword never touched anything as it swung in front of him. By the time it was going to hit the hammer, the upper half of the hammer had already disappeared. He was a little happy learning that the man could not use the explosive essence anymore. As long as he avoided hand-to-hand combat, he should be fine. So, he prepared his sword and got ready to attack. Greyfire's eyes wandered around for a moment and finally noticed the top half of his weapon, which seemed to be low on essence. How did it lose so much durability at once? He thought with a frightened look. He quickly turned around toward Ning. Was it this man? It was most likely the boss, but Greyfire needed to be sure. He saw that Ning was ready to attack, so he prepared an attack of his own. Powerful wind gathered around him as it threatened to destroy everything around him. Ning felt the winds too and frowned. Essence Manifestation Realm, he thought. Damn, I forgot they were supposed to be this strong. It was the fourth rank in the Essence Realms, one where people could manifest their essence as a certain element or two. Most people could only use one, and it seemed like Greyfire's element was air. The wind became strong as it spun faster and faster around him. As it picked up speed, it picked up the debris in the ground as well. Soon enough, there was a cyclone forming underground that was going to send out the objects at an incredibly fast speed. If they had any chance of survival before, it was all disappearing now. You people forgot that I am alone. Greyfire shouted from inside the cyclone, which was completely stopping him from being seen. So, I do not have to hold back at all. The wind got faster and objects started slipping out of the wind, like bullets from a gun. You will all die, Toda. Suddenly the objects started flying out fast as the wind itself slowed down to a crawl. Ning couldn't create a rock barrier in time at all, but a shadow barrier appeared at the last minute, saving all three of them. Ning and the others could hear the objects smashing walls and doors all around the room, and only the three of them were safe thanks to the shadow wall. The shadow wall slowly dissipated, and the first thing all three of them saw was a lone Greyfire standing still with his lifeless eyes wide open. A sharp shadow spike had gone through the back of his head and come out from the mouth, killing him instantly. The body slowly slipped to the side, falling to the ground, and revealed the person that stood behind it. Clara stepped over the dead Greyfire's head and stomped it so hard that his skull burst wide open. So, we're done here, right? Ning looked at the girl with a stunned look on his face. Clara, the black-haired girl, had brought him and Carlos here before to talk with the boss. That same girl had now killed Greyfire. Where did she come from? He wondered as he stared at her. There were only three of them here the entire time. Has she come from the open roof? No. Ning thought of something. When did she get out? After she had brought the two of them here, she had just vanished, and none of them had noticed. She had definitely not left by the door as Ning had been there the entire time. Then where had she disappeared to? What's going on? Carlos asked as he was confused as well. Kepla, do you need treatment? Clara asked. I'm fine. I will just need to absorb some earth essence, Kepla said. Absorb the pure one, Clara said. Carlos, give the essence crystal you brought to Kepla, he needs it. He will also test the purity of the essence in it. Are you? Carlos could barely believe what he was about to ask. She is the boss, Kepla said as he slowly got back up. The boss of the Paradise Hunters. Both Ning and Carlos looked back in shock and awe, as not in a million years would they have expected a young girl to be the boss of one of the biggest gangs in the entire empire. But the boss is a man, Carlos said. I've heard his voice. Yes, you've heard my voice. Clara spoke with her normal voice. However, layered on top of that voice was another deeper voice, a more distorted one that sounded like a male voice. Carlos had no doubt that this was the boss's voice. And the silhouette? He asked. A simple craft, Clara said as she created a humanoid shadow next to her, one that seemed to be filled with black fog that roiled around in itself. It was no different than the black shadow that was inside of Dale and Bodrick. All right. Give him the crystal now, Clara ordered. Why yes, boss, Carlos said and quickly turned around to help Kepla. Clara looked at the crystal that was brought out. She stared at it for a few seconds as the energy inside was taken in by Kepla. Kepla's eyes went wide as he looked at the crystal in his hands and then back to his boss. This is extremely pure, boss, Kepla said. How pure? Clara asked. I will have to get the people to do some actual experimentation, but judging by the flow alone, I will say it's about 80% pure, if not more. Clara's dark eyes seemed to shine when she heard that. 80%? That's quite unheard of in this section of the Empire, she said. You can only find it in big auctions on the southern side. If we can get the monopoly on the mine, we will definitely grow bigger, Kepla said. All right, heal first. We will deal with it all later, Clara said. Carlos, carry him. We will be leaving this place now. Yes, boss, Carlos said. He picked Kepla onto his back and walked out of the front door. They did not go up the stairs as they would be swarming with city guards at any time now. Instead, they followed a secret path to a secret exit that sent them out into an alleyway. From there, they walked anonymously to another building on the other side of the city. By the time they were there, Kepla could already walk on his own, and his ribs didn't hurt as much anymore. Clara sat on a chair at a large table and gestured for the others to sit as well. Kepla and Carlos sat on either side of the boss, but Ning sat opposite to her. What's your name? The girl asked him. My name is Ning, Ning replied to her. Ning, huh? So, what's your story? She asked. I have none, Ning said. He wanted my help, so I did. You decided to help him because he asked? Clara asked. He said he would pay me 50 earth coins, Ning said. And you jumped into a gang fight for 50 earth coins? Clara asked. I needed the money, he said. Clara narrowed her eyes and stared at Ning for a few seconds. She tried to figure out what was going on here exactly. She turned around to Carlos as she looked for answers. Carlos explained the situation, how he found him and what they had done together. Boss, he is strong, Carlos said as he turned around as well. Brother Ning killed Jaren and defeated Hansen all by himself. I find it hard to believe someone with such little essence can do that, Clara said with her arms crossed in front of her. Did he sneak attack? No, he is just a very good fighter, Carlos said. His swordsmanship is out of this world. Clara raised an eyebrow. If you don't mind answering, please tell us where you learned how to fight, she said. I don't know, Ning replied. Clara frowned for a second, but Carlos was there to explain the situation. Boss, he has lost his memories after an accident in the sea. He doesn't remember who he was or where he came from. I doubt he remembers how he learned to fight. Clara looked at Carlos for a second before turning back to Ning. You don't remember anything? She asked. No, not really, Ning said. But you remember your name? Clara asked. I think so, Ning said. I'm not sure if that's my name or not, but that is the first word that comes to my mind when I think of what my name might be. So you remember your name and the fact that you can fight? What else do you remember? She asked. Nothing, honestly, Ning said. I'm trying to find where I came from, so I am roaming the cities for that. Someone in the physical improvement realm with no memory of who he was and what he even was, can somehow beat someone like Jaren and Hansen. Why do I find that hard to believe? She asked. Oh, boss. That's not the only thing about Brother Ning, he said quickly. His sword is incredible as well. It's a really good sword. A good sword? She asked as she stared at the sword in Ning's hands. It looks like a normal stone sword to me. It might even be a dirt sword. It's a rock sword, Carlos said. A giant one at that. Nearly as large as this house, I would say. As big as this house? Clara asked suspiciously. She found it hard to believe something that large could exist in the hands of a normal person. Give me the sword. Ning frowned a little. Did she want the sword to test it? What if she liked it? Would she kill him to take it from him? Clara noticed him getting defensive and sighed. I don't need your sword. I can't even use it because my shadow essence is very impure, she said. Oh, okay, Ning said and tossed the sword over the table. Be careful, it's heavy. The sword slid above the table and arrived next to Clara. Clara grabbed the hilt of the sword as it moved. She tried to stop the sword right there, but it kept going. She used all of her physical strength to block it and even went as far as to use her essence to enhance her body. However, even then, when the sword went past the table, it immediately fell to the ground. Clara realized that if she continued holding, her hand would get crushed under the weight of the sword, so at the last minute, she let go of the sword, which lightly slammed on the floor. Her eyes went wide in shock and she got down to pick the sword up once again. She tried with all her might, but she couldn't even budge the sword at all. "How big did you say the rock was?" she asked as she huffed a little weakly. "As big as this house? Maybe bigger," Ning said. "That's not possible at all," Clara said as she got closer to check the sword's blade. "No, the rock was definitely as big as we said, boss," Carlos said. "No, I'm not saying you are lying," Clara said. "I'm saying that you are wrong. If the rock used to make this sword was as big as you said it was, I would have been able to budge it. However, given that I was not able to, it's definitely larger. The question now is, how large?" The group looked in awe at the sword on the ground. Ning walked over and picked it back up and looked at it closely. "How big can it be?" he asked. "There's only one way to know," Clara said. "You will have to use as much essence as you can to bring out the rock from the sword." "As much essence? That was what I used last time and that massive rock came out," Ning said. "Yes, but your physical improvement realm barely even has any essence. You need to be at least in the essence sense realm to make good use of any essence weapons," she said. "So, I have to wait many years before I can figure out how big the sword really is, huh?" Clara said. "Yes, that's the only way to have a definite answer," Clara said. "But, I can make a guess based on what information I have gathered." "Ooh, what is your guess?" Ning asked excitedly. "That sword is made from something very large, far larger than the rock you mentioned. It's either a single rock, or multiple ones, but they add up to become as large as the largest building in this city, maybe even larger." "How can there be rocks larger than the largest building out there?" Carlos asked. "It doesn't have to be a rock, specifically," she said. "It just has to be something with the same composition as the rock." "Meaning?" Ning asked. "It can be pebbles, but a large amount of it. Imagine someone went to a river bank, collected all the small rocks there, and use it," Clara said. "But I believe it's made up of something big." "What's the biggest it can be in your opinion?" Ning asked. Clara thought for a second. "Show me the sword again?" she asked. Ning took the sword close to her. Kepler moved immediately, but Clara stopped him. "He's not trying to hurt me, relax," she said. Ning smiled and let her watch it for a while. "No, it's not what I thought it was," she said. "What did you think it was?" Ning asked. "There was once a rumor that something was made into a weapon some 24 years ago. I was wondering if this sword was it, but it's not," Clara said. "What was turned into a weapon?" Ning asked. The others waited impatiently for her answer as well. "A mountain," Clara said. "A mountain vanished overnight in the Sernach Empire, and everyone believed it was turned into a weapon. Given the weight, I almost fooled myself into thinking that sword was it, but it's not." "I see," Ning said. "Well, as long as it is large, it should be helpful in the future." "Yes," Clara said. "Speaking of the future, what are your plans?" "My plans?" Ning asked. "I don't know. I think I will just go from city to city and try to see if someone remembers me." Clara looked at him for a second. "You know who I am and have seen my face, so I cannot let you leave just as you like," she said. "What?" Ning asked with a frown on his face. "So, I will give you two choices from here forward," she said. "First, you will be killed so that my secret never gets out into the world." "Like hell," Ning shouted back at her. "Then you have no choice but to go with the second choice," she said. "What's that?" Ning asked. "You will join the Paradise Hunters." "So my choices are dying or joining you guys?" Ning asked as he narrowed his eyes at the three that sat before him. "Yes," Clara spoke with not much emotion in her eyes. That's a hard decision," Ning said as he slumped back on his chair. "Give me a moment." Carlos and Kepler gave a weird look to each other. They couldn't imagine why he was not just simply accepting the deal. Clara was surprised as well. "Do you really have to think to make a choice between life and death?" she asked. "Others might fear death, but I don't," Ning said. "I only fear what I might have to do if I were to join the gang." "Do you guys go around asking for protection fees from various stores in the Empire?" Clara looked around awkwardly. What's a protection fee? She asked. The other two shrugged as they weren't aware of such a thing at all. Ning realized that he might have spoken about something they didn't know about, so he quickly changed the subject. Do you steal from innocent people? He asked. Hurt them to benefit yourself? How do you make money? What's the purpose of your gang? Clara narrowed her eyes as she watched Ning's expression, but found it difficult to get any information from them. We don't steal from anyone, she said. We have people in the merchant and mercenary business that bring in money. We monopolize on getting those tasks and thus earn from them. Most people end up having to pay a little extra to get the services they want, but that's about it. We don't go around looting and pillaging people if that's what you were asking. Ning nodded when he heard that. And the purpose of the gang? He asked. Primarily to make money, Clara said. Although, there are other motives behind me forming a gang, but those motives are private to me, so I won't be answering. Okay, so what will I have to do if I were to join? Ning asked. Same thing as everyone. Mercenary or merchant, your choice, Clara said. Ning smiled. Very well, I'll join, he said. Good, the girl said with no change in expression. Now, let's talk about what you are not allowed. Yes. I won't tell anyone, anything about you at all, Ning said. I know how to keep a secret, don't worry. Clara paused for a second, then continued. If so, the next thing I have to do is test you to see what you are better at, she said. You are a courageous one, and Carlos had vetted for your fighting capabilities, so having you go into the mercenary line would be a good idea. But just to be safe, I want to check your other skills too. Maybe you are better for the merchant line than you appear to be, she said. Sure, do whatever you have to do, Ning said. I'm ready for all of it. All right, I'll test you personally, Clara said. Carlos, look after Kepla for a while. Kepla, get that crystal tested. Yes, boss. The two of them spoke at the same time. Ning looked back at Clara and asked, Do I have to call you boss from now on? What else will you call me? Clara asked. Can't I just call you by your name? Ning asked. Clara frowned a little when she heard that. Is that how you plan on keeping my identity hidden? By calling out my name every time we speak? She asked. Oh shit. You're right. My bad, boss, Ning said and continued walking. Clara stared at him with a weird look on her face before sighing finally. Not that way. Why are you going on ahead like you know the place? I thought we were going outside to test my fighting skills, Ning said. No, I need to do something about your memory first, Clara said. Follow me. Ning got a little curious and followed the girl. They arrived at a room on the second floor that was full of books from ground to ceiling. Whoa. That's a lot of books. You like reading books, boss? He asked. This isn't our place, Clara said. It used to belong to a moderately rich noble who died during a pirate attack on his way to the Glades Kingdom. He was apparently some sort of knowledge collector, so he has a lot of books. Although most of them are stories, there are a few with information that can help us. Black fog rolled from Clara's fingers that flew to one of the books on the shelf. The book flew back down to a study table beside the window. Clara gestured for Ning to sit down. Ning curiously went up to the book and looked at it. The many wonderful places of the Glacian continent. He read the words on the book. So you can read, Clara said. I thought you lost your memories. I did, Ning said as he flipped through the book. But I didn't lose everything. Just as I remember my name and how to speak or how to eat, I also remember how to read. Although, I don't remember most of these names in here. What is the Glacian continent exactly? Clara sat down opposite him and explained. In this world, there are 3 continents, she said as she flipped the book in Ning's hand until it reached a world map. This is the Glacian continent, the one we are on. This down here is the Springwind continent, and in the east here we have the Blue Flame continent. What's this nonsense at the top? A smudge? Ning asked. That's not a smudge. That's a cluster of islands, large enough to become a continent in its own right, but no one lives there at all, Clara said. They say the waves get so high that most of these islands are underwater for multiple months at a time. The people around the world have unanimously named it the Sunken Lands. Ning read the book for a while. He was told to ignore the wonderful places on the map, and just focus on learning the names and places that would be beneficial for him. As Ning read, He realized that he was on the westernmost edge of the Crowler Empire. If he wanted to, he could go to the Frolane Empire in just a short day, but if he wanted to go through the entire Crowler Empire, it would take a week or two, maybe even more. There were also the Osager Empire and the Blackhawk Dominion on the Glacian continent, but he didn't seem to have to worry about that right now. That's too much to remember at once for sure, Ning said as he closed the map. How much do you remember? Clara asked. I know the 5 empires and a few cities in the Crowler Empire. I think I can cough up a more if I think for a while, but I'll have to read it again to remember more, Ning said. So not much of an intelligent person, are you? Clara asked. Hey, don't just go calling me dumb just because my talents lie elsewhere, Ning said. Clara shook her head. Take the book with you and try to remember the city names, she said. You can also read any book you want in this study. For now, come with me. Since you won't be a merchant, you'll have to train to be a mercenary. Ning nodded and walked out to the backyards of the building. The noble's backyard was quite spacious, despite being in the middle of the city. There was enough for a person to play or train. There were a few people there, and Clara acted like she wasn't the boss at all. The other people didn't recognize her, so Ning didn't try to out her either. What's first? He asked. I need to know how strong you are for now, she said. Try punching that rock. Ning followed her gaze and saw an almost volcanic glass-like rock. He touched the flat side of the rock and looked back at her. What is this? He asked. We call it the training rock. It's a piece of rock that's forged around volcanoes, and it is known to have immense essence hidden inside it that one cannot tap into, Clara explained. The essence moved away from the side of the glass that feels a strong force. Depending on how hard you hit, the glass will get clearer. Punch it with your fist so we can see how strong it is, she said. Ning nodded and wasted no time as he punched the glass as hard as he could. As soon as his fist landed on the glass, it suddenly got clearer. However, it wasn't clear enough for Ning to see much difference. It barely got any clearer, huh? Ning said. Did I do something wrong? Do I try again? He turned around as he questioned his next actions when he suddenly stopped. What's wrong with you? He asked. Clara looked at him with the most incredulous look she had seen yet. She hadn't even shown this much emotion when she had killed the 3 bosses all by herself. How did you do that? She asked, with the shock still audible in her voice. How did I do what? Ning asked. Your strength, Clara said. It's over 15 times as strong as a normal person. Are you really not in the 5-sense improvement realm? How can I be? Ning asked. I only just got on the physical improvement realm like a month and a half ago. Clara's eyes went wider and she shook his head. That's not possible, she said. Try again. Ning shrugged and punched again, creating the same result once again. Now what? He asked. Clara thought for a bit and walked up to him. Give me your hand, she said. Ning put forth his hand, and Clara grabbed it quickly. Now, push your essence into my hand, she said. Ning didn't question her and did as he was told to do. He poured what little essence into her hand and watched her reaction. It was like watching a child see the ocean for the first time. Clara's eyes were wide open as if she had never seen something so great before in her life. Your essence, it's so pure, she said. Oh, is that so? Ning asked. Pure essence is good, right? That's what they told me. It is, Clara said as his eyes ran around. How did you come to have essence with such high purity? Is it more pure than the 80% pure essence crystal by any chance? Ning asked. Yes, it's definitely way more pure. It maybe even crossed the 95% mark. Although, I've never seen pure essence, so I cannot judge exactly, she said. Where did you find it? As you boss, I order you to answer. Ning's eyes narrowed. Don't go using your authority so needlessly. I would have told you even if you didn't order me to, he said. You would give such a valuable information without a command? Clara was surprised. I mean, there's no point in me hiding the information since it won't help you at all, Ning said. Have you heard of the divine beasts? Of course I've heard of the divine beasts. They're fables that are said to live on the ocean floor. Why do you ask? She questioned. Well, the essence in me came from a fruit on a tree, on an island, that was on top of a giant turtle, in the middle of the ocean. Clara's eyes narrowed when she heard him. Are you seriously suggesting that you got your essence from a divine beast? She asked. No, no, from the fruit, not the beast, Ning said. I ate a lot of those fruits while I was stuck on the island back then. I was only able to leave that place because the turtle came floating close to land, from where I swam. How much does this information help you?